Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Victoria Salas. This story takes place in Mexico. Victoria Salas was born on August 31, 1994, known as Pam to her close friends. She was the second child in her family, with an older sister and a younger brother. Their parents, Salvador San Pedro and Consuelo Martinez Salas, were humble and hard-working individuals who aimed to instill strong values in their children and encourage a love of work. The family lived in Mexico City, in a house that belonged to Victoria's grandmother, who had serious health issues. She took care of her grandmother and followed doctor's advice to protect her from stress. In 2017, she worked at a marketing company and dreamed of buying a new house for her family. Although she wanted to study tourism, she had to leave high school to help support her family, which struggled financially at that time. Her mother is a housewife, and her father worked at a gas station. Victoria enjoyed dressing well. She wore bright dresses, applied striking makeup, dyed her hair, and often wore high heels. Like many young people, she loved spending time with friends and enjoying life. In 2015, during one of her walks, Victoria met a young man named Mario Sáenz, 27 years old. After their initial meeting, they began spending more time together. Mario was 6 years older than Victoria. He had a 10-year-old son from a previous relationship. Mario followed his passion for skateboarding and turned it into a career. He started skateboarding at a young age and quickly became the best in Mexico City, eventually ranking among the top 5 in the country. His success in prestigious international competitions attracted sponsors and helped popularize skateboarding in Mexico. He also opened themed stores in Mexico City as a prominent figure in the sports industry. Mario gained a significant following on social media. He aimed to compete in the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo, but unforeseen circumstances prevented him from doing so. Mario and Victoria continued to see each other. By early 2017, their relationship had become more stable. Victoria often stayed with Mario and spent a lot of time with his son. However, like many relationships, they experienced ups and downs. Friends of them noted that Mario was very jealous and tried to control Victoria in various aspects of her life. This led to several breakups, but they always reconciled. On August 31, 2017, her 23rd birthday, her mother woke her up at 7 a.m. to ensure she could enjoy the morning. After getting ready with makeup, a beautiful dress, and new shoes, Victoria went to work. Throughout the day, she texted her mother, sharing that she had received 2 chocolate cakes as gifts. Victoria promised her mother they would eat the cakes together when she got home. However, later in the evening, she informed her mother that she would be arriving late because she was celebrating her birthday with Mario. The next morning, her mother, Consuelo, reached out to Victoria and learned that she hadn't gone to work yet. Victoria explained that she had taken a day off from work and with Mario had gone to Morelos during the day. Victoria received a call from her father, Salvador, who wanted to know when she would return home and where she was. Victoria repeated the same information she had given her mother, assuring her father that she would be home in a few hours. After several of waiting, Victoria still had not returned home, and her family was growing increasingly anxious. As time passed, their worry intensified. Their attempts to reach her by phone failed. By Saturday, Victoria was not coming home. Consuelo felt a deep unease, yet she tried to keep calm, imagining that any moment she would hear footsteps and see her daughter walk in. By Saturday evening, the family's questions and concerns multiplied as they gathered by the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of her familiar figure. Around 8 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Unfortunately, it was the police. Consuelo immediately started asking them questions. Desperate to understand why they were there, the police provided a vague response. Leaving, she disappointed and anxious. They informed her that they couldn't share details at that moment and requested that she accompany them to the prosecutor's office in Tlalpan. On the way to the prosecutor's office, the police asked Consuelo several questions. including whether she knew a young man named Mario. When she confirmed that she knew him, they inquired about his possible whereabouts. They arrived at the prosecutor's office around 10 p.m. Initially, Consuelo was informed that her daughter was accused of stealing face cream, but they soon realized this information was incorrect. Another girl with the same name as her daughter had been detained for theft at the same facility. Later, Consuelo received distressing news. Her daughter, Victoria, had been killed. This revelation shocked her deeply, her unable to comprehend what had happened. At that point, the police had already formed a preliminary theory based on their investigation. They believed that Mario was the last person to see Victoria alive, making him the primary suspect in the case, according to police information about the final hours of the victim's life. Events unfolded on Friday evening. A group of young people returning from Morelos stopped at the Novo Coapa Hotel in a busy area and rented Villa number 20. After arriving, they ordered food and drinks for dinner. Shortly after, they contacted the hotel administrator to report issues with the Wi-Fi. A hotel employee came to the villa to resolve the internet problem. The next call to the reception happened at 5:30 a.m. on Saturday. At that time, a young man named Mario approached the front desk and stated that he was checking out of the villa, but that his girlfriend would remain there for a while when it was time for checkout. The cleaning lady went to Villa number 20 to perform her duties. She knocked on the door, but there was no response. She then used her key to enter the villa and was shocked to find the interior stained with blood. In the bathroom, she discovered Victoria's lifeless body. The body was found in the bathtub, with hot water overflowing onto the floor. After some time, the hotel administrator contacted the police. Forensic experts discovered that Victoria had suffered multiple blows, leaving various injuries on her body. They also found severe burns on her skin, caused by prolonged exposure to hot water. The cause of death was identified as a deep laceration on her throat. On September 3rd, the day after the tragic news, Victoria's relatives held a wake at the Chapel of the Divine Infantina in Tolgan. They shared their emotions and memories with one another. Mario, the prime suspect in Victoria's murder, also attended the wake. To their shock, his presence angered the family. As they were aware of his role in the case, Mario claimed he came to express his condolences and to present documents that he believed would clear him of suspicion. Into Mario's presence, Victoria's relatives called the police. Officers arrived and detained Mario, taking him to the prosecutor's office on September 4. During a press conference dedicated to this case, the prosecutor of Mexico City called the murder of Victoria a femicide. The prosecutor also stated that the suspect in the murder was already giving his testimony to the prosecutor's office. On September 6, Mario was unexpectedly released from custody after evidence proved he was in a different location on the night of the murder. He had a document from government agencies that verified his alibi, stating he had an accident to hitting a pothole on that night. Mario explained that he promptly reported the accident to his insurance company and filed a complaint with the prosecutor's office, seeking compensation from the city for the damages. He also mentioned being with friends that night, who could testify on his behalf, despite claiming his innocence. Mario quickly tried to leave the country after his release. A month has passed since Victoria's murder, and her parents have continued to demand justice from the authorities, realizing that they will face a long and difficult journey to find accountability. They encountered numerous obstacles that complicated the process. The delays in the case were due to several factors, including an earthquake that struck Mexico City, particularly affecting the regions of Ebla and Morelos on September 19, 2017. Consequently, in October 2017, judge of the Mexico City High Court issued an arrest warrant for Mario. The judge stated that Mario's alibi could not be verified and that the evidence collected by the police indicated he was the murder victim. The judge noted that the surveillance camera in the transport service did not capture any footage of Mario, who had allegedly filed a complaint at the time of the murder, Soon after, Mexican authorities announced that Mario had been placed on the international wanted list, and a notice was sent to Interpol. They feared that he might attempt to flee the country, or may have already done so, according to the prosecutor's information. There were multiple witness statements against Mario. Along with other evidence, forensic experts discovered tissue samples from Victoria's nails that matched Mario's DNA. Additionally, a surveillance camera at the hotel where the incident occurred recorded an individual resembling Mario entering and exiting the premises. However, the hotel's security staff could not provide the requested video footage. Citing a malfunction in their video surveillance system, detectives interviewed Victoria's relatives and friends, concluding that Mario's excessive jealousy was the primary factor in the murder. Analysis of the victim's mobile phone supported this conclusion. By then, the case was widely reported in the media, leading to a divided public opinion. Some believed in Mario's innocence, while others thought he was guilty. Mario's supporters launched a social media campaign to back him, which included efforts to discredit Victoria and her lifestyle. As part of this campaign, they portrayed Victoria as a troubled girl suffering from depression who abused alcohol and banned substance. Meanwhile, Victoria's family, supported by various women's organizations, defended her reputation by countering the false claims made by Mario's supporters. They cited official documents, including the autopsy report, which showed no traces of illegal substances in Victoria's body or blood. Additionally, the victim's relatives filed a complaint with the capital's prosecutor's office, challenging the decision to keep the suspect free. Their efforts not end there. On December 15, 2017, the victim's family, supported by several feminist organizations, held a rally outside the general prosecutor's office in Mexico City. They called on authorities to arrest the person responsible for Victoria's death. On the same day, the family, along with the National Observatory to Combat Femicide, asked the authorities to hand over the case. At that time, the observatory had classified Victoria's case as simple murder. Consuelo approached prosecutor Edmundo Porfiri during a personal meeting. She highlighted that nearly 5 months had passed since her daughter's death, yet there had been little progress in the investigation. In response, the prosecutor agreed to forward the case to a special agency focused on investigating crimes against women. They also agreed to form a working group that would include all stakeholders, allowing for daily oversight of the investigation's progress. One of the consulate's main requests was to accelerate efforts to apprehend the individual responsible for the crimes. On March 30, 2019, nearly 19 months after Victoria's death, Mario was arrested. He voluntarily went to the prosecutor's office with his lawyer before turning himself in. Mario released a video from a moving car, stating his intention to surrender. In the video, he maintained his innocence and criticized the prosecutor's office for allegedly fabricating charges against him. The preliminary hearing took place on March 31, 2019. The prosecution accused Mario of inflicting bodily harm on Victoria, on stabbing her in the neck, which resulted in her death. In contrast, Mario's defense argued that no fingerprints had been found in the hotel room where the murder occurred, suggesting there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime scene. After review, the judge informally decided to place Mario in custody. On April 4, 2019, a hearing was held regarding the murder of Victoria. Her parents, along with family members, attended the session at the Supreme Court. After a 12-hour trial, Mario was charged, and the judge ordered a 2-month delay in sentencing until the investigation was complete. The victim's family experienced a mix of emotions and think that, now, justice would be served, while it cannot bring Victoria come back. This progress in the case represents a significant step forward for her family. The final hearing took place at the Mexico City Criminal Justice Center. Mario has not pleaded guilty. In her statement, Consuelo urged the court to deliver justice and hold Mario accountable for his actions. Mario Sáenz was finally convicted of murdering Victoria Salas under the Mexican Penal Code. A murder motivated by hatred carries a sentence of up to 70 years in prison. In this case, the judges sentenced Mario to 45 years in prison and ordered him to pay the victim's family 485,000 pesos, equivalent to about $23,000 after the verdict was announced. The media reported statements from both Victoria's mother and Mario's mother, who had opposing views on the case. Victoria's mother expressed relief that her daughter could finally rest in peace, feeling satisfied that Mario would be held accountable. In contrast, Mario's mother argued that her son was wrongly convicted of a crime he did not commit. She emphasized her determination to prove his innocence and informed the media that she was preparing to appeal the verdict. Mario's account on an entertainment channel posted a statement claiming that he was convicted of a crime he did not commit, despite the absence of his DNA at the scene of the crime. After the passage of time, Mario's defense was able to appeal the court's decision, but on December 1, 2022, the sentence of 45 years in prison was reinstated. This is thanks to each of Victoria's family members. They to wage fight for justice, trying to cope with the loss and the emptiness that forever settled in their hearts. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Amy Carnavale. Amy Carnavale was born on April 13th of this year in Beverly, Massachusetts, USA. Her father was a science teacher at a local school, and her mother worked as an investment consultant. Amy had a brother, Christopher, who was born 4 years earlier. Their family was very close-knit, supporting each other during difficult times. However, a few years after Amy's birth, tensions began to rise in the family. Eventually, her parents decided to divorce. At the time, Amy was just 6 years old, and the news was a huge shock for her. She struggled with her feelings for a while but eventually came to accept the situation. When she started school, it marked a new hopeful chapter in her life. Throughout this period, her family maintained their connection with her, which helped ease the emotional effects of her parents' separation. Amy was a beautiful and intelligent girl who became popular at school. She joined the cheerleading team and played field hockey. Friendly and sociable. Despite her busy social life, she had a deep love for nature and enjoyed spending time outdoors. Amy often combined her passion for nature with sports by playing golf with her father. Although she lived with her mother, she had a strong and positive relationship with her father. Amy dreams of becoming a hairstylist or hairdresser because she enjoys making her friends look beautiful. At this point in her life, she is preparing to enter high school, and she is a member of the school's cheerleading squad. She recently met a boy named Jamie Fuller at a friend's party. Amy was 12 years old, and Jamie was 14 at the time. It was well known that Jamie was a difficult person and often disrupted the peace at school. While he wasn't aggressive or malicious, some of his jokes crossed the line. Amy's parents disapproved of the relationship, thinking he was not good enough for her. When they first met, he was a skinny guy. But later he decided to get fit and build muscle to impress others. In pursuit of this, he chose to use steroids to accelerate his progress. Their relationship faced frequent challenges. There were times when they wouldn't speak for weeks but would eventually get back together. However, after he began using steroids, Amy and her friends noticed significant changes in his behavior. Jamie became increasingly aggressive and unpredictable. Their arguments grew more common, occurring both at school and outside of it. Jamie's treatment of Amy deteriorated, and some of his friends reported that he made hurtful comments that she did not deserve. Things got worse. At Amy's age, she didn't know what to focus on in a relationship or how to fight back against her boyfriend's controlling behavior. Jamie acted like he was in charge, trying to control every aspect of her life. Jamie began dictating who she could talk to and wanted to know where she was at all times. He even tried to create conflict between her and her closest friends and family. Jamie became increasingly controlling, telling her what to wear, how to look, and who she could be friends with. He tried to cut her off from school sports teams. Even though Amy complied with his demands, he continued to find new ways to insult and provoke her. Amy's friends often witnessed the humiliation she faced at Jamie's hands. Since 2020, several states have enacted laws classifying manipulative and controlling behavior as a crime. Research shows that this behavior often marks the beginning of a dangerous path that can lead to physical violence or even death for the victim. Unfortunately, at that time, had nothing to charge against him. Despite the fact that her friends were very worried about what was happening, Jamie's behavior became increasingly unpredictable and problems with the law began. In the 90s, he was arrested twice for armed assault on a person. However, due to his age and lack of previous offenses, Jamie got away with it. He also convinced his girlfriend to keep quiet about these incidents. During this time, Amy did not share much about her relationship difficulties with others. She and Jamie frequently broke up and got back together, indicating that their relationship was in trouble. Jamie eventually left and Amy informed her friends of the breakup, but they reconciled soon after. Amy rarely shared her problems, partly because she was raised by her mother, who worked long hours and could not fully deal with her daughter's personal problems. Therefore, Amy kept her feelings to herself. At the same time, they were dealing with housing issues after a long period of renting. During this time, Amy stayed with various friends and lived with Diane Viggers, one of Jamie's ex-girlfriends. Despite this relationship, they became good friends. The situation was expected to improve on September 5, 1991, when Amy, her mother, and brother prepared to move into their new home. They had been renting for a long time, which had put a strain on their family finances, making this move a much-anticipated change in their lives. Amy had been living with her friend Diane before this incident. After breaking up with her manipulative boyfriend again, she was determined not to get back together with him. That day, she attended another field hockey practice and excitedly told her friends about her decision to end the toxic relationship for good. However, she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend, Jamie, kept calling her. Although she tried to ignore him, he was persistent. He wanted to see her, but she refused. He eventually asked her if she would like to cut his hair as a farewell gesture to their past relationship. After some consideration, she agreed and made plans to visit Jamie that evening, planning to return home a few hours later. Amy did not come home on time, and Diane was very worried about her. Amy was only 14 years old, so the delay made her friend increasingly worried. Diane called Amy's mother, and she could not find her daughter either. Their concerns increased when they discovered that Amy had left her purse and personal belongings behind, indicating that she did not intend to be gone for long. After waiting until morning, they decided to contact the police. After arriving at the police station, Amy's mother made plans to meet Jamie, whom Amy was supposed to meet. Jamie was cooperative from the start. He spoke to both the mother and the police and answered their questions openly. He even joined in the search efforts in the area. Despite being the prime suspect in Amy's disappearance, no evidence of her has ever been found. Searches of Jamie's home and car have turned up nothing. On August 28, 1991, an anonymous informant contacted the police station, claiming to know the location of Amy's body. This revelation caught the police's attention, and they were keen to find out the identity of this informant and the source of his information. The informant was identified as 19-year-old Michael Melita, a friend of Jamie's. When the police arrived at his home, he promptly agreed to assist with the investigation. At the police department, he confessed everything he knew about the tragic events of August 23. He explained that on August 22, the day before, Amy had planned to go to the beach with her friends. Jamie discovered her plans and grew angry. Fearing that there would be other guys at the beach party, his jealousy intensified. He felt restless and wanted to control Amy. On that same day, he met with Michael and voiced his wish to kill his ex-girlfriend. Multiple individuals were aware of Jamie's harmful intentions, yet none reported these plans to the police. They failed to warn Amy or her parents about the potential threat. On the evening of August 23rd, Amy visited her ex-boyfriend's house, thinking she was just there to get a haircut. However, she found 3 other boys there, 15-year-old Dominic Scola, 19-year-old Michael Melita, and 17-year-old Scott Ward. Just before Amy arrived, Jamie took out a large knife and showed it to the others, saying it was for his ex-girlfriend. He then placed the knife on a dresser. Jamie then suggested that the group take a walk in the nearby woods. During the walk, he and Amy went ahead while the other 3 lost sight of them. Michael confessed that he didn't completely believe Jamie's intentions to harm Amy, but no one felt brave enough to stop him because they were scared. Ultimately, Michael was the only one who ran to the location where Jamie and Amy had gone. He discovered Jamie covered in blood. Amy suffered multiple stab wounds on her chest, back, and stomach. Despite her injuries, she attempted to get up and escape, but her attacker was relentless. Michael mentioned that he didn't hear her screams until it was too late to help her. After Amy, who had her throat cut, collapsed, she continued to fight for her life. In that moment, she managed to say, "Jamie, I love you," which only enraged her attacker further. Jamie then began to stomp on her head. Afterward, Jamie, covered in blood, returned to his friends and described the events in detail while waving a bloody knife. Michael noted that everyone was afraid of becoming the next target, so they supported Jamie's actions. They all went home together, where they spent several hours drinking and talking calmly. Jamie took a shower to wash off the blood and changed his clothes. Jamie and Michael walked into the woods to where Amy's body was left. It was dark by then. They wrapped her body in trash bags and joked about the situation, showing no remorse or regret. When they reached the pond, they tied several concrete blocks together and threw the body into the water from the dock. Jamie made a sarcastic comment as he drowned Amy's body. He then took a bloody bracelet and necklace from her, wiped the blood off them, and wore them around his neck. This behavior is typical of a serial killer who keeps trophies as a reminder of his crimes. After Michael explained everything to the police, he was asked again how he could be involved in Amy's death. He clarified that he did not stab her, he only helped his friend dispose of her body because he was threatened. Michael confessed that he was afraid of Jamie. He believed that if Jamie learned about his conversation with the police, he would be killed. According to Michael, at first, the group thought the idea of murder was a terrible joke, and they only grasped the seriousness of the situation when it was too late. As the situation progressed, the 3 friends went along with Jamie's plans to avoid provoking him. On August 28, the informant was taken to the pond he had described. Michael pointed out the spot where the body was disposed of. Around 7:30 a.m., divers discovered Amy's body, which was in a shocking condition. It was evident that she had been murdered violently. The forensic expert identified that she was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she went missing. Analysis confirmed that she died on Friday, the evening she disappeared. Additionally, experts validated all of Michael's statements about the injuries on her body. They found about 10 stab wounds and a severe cut to her throat. The police could not find Jamie. Jamie's mother said she did not know where he was. So the police decided to interview the young people that Michael had mentioned. It turned out that they had known about the murder plan for over a year. During this time, the couple frequently broke up and got back together after Amy decided to leave Jamie. He did not want to let her go because he could not allow her to be with someone else. Therefore, in the end, he decided to kill her. As the police questioned the young men, more disturbing details about the case emerged. Just before they broke up, Amy had told her boyfriend that she was pregnant. He was upset by the news, especially since Amy had intended to keep the baby. Jamie was furious and even gave money to friends to attack Amy, hoping she would lose the baby. He wanted to avoid the responsibility of being a father, but his friends refused to help him. One of Jamie's friends recalled Jamie shouting that Amy had never agreed to terminate the pregnancy. Jamie eventually decided to take action against her. However, after an autopsy, police discovered that Amy was not pregnant at the time of her death. The rumor of her pregnancy became one of many speculations in the case. However, this does not rule out the possibility that she may have been pregnant with Jamie's child and had terminated the pregnancy. Unfortunately, her physical condition makes it impossible to verify these claims. The police began talking to Diane, who had lived with Amy before she was murdered. It turned out that Diane was Jamie's ex-girlfriend and had gone through the same problems in her relationship with Jamie as Amy had. Diane completely empathized with Amy's experience in a toxic relationship. Diane had also faced abuse and pressure from Jamie, but she had successfully escaped the situation unscathed. Unbeknownst to her, Diane had known about Jamie's plan to kill Amy shortly before Amy moved in with her. Jamie had mentioned taking Amy for a walk in the woods where he would give her flowers. Then stab her and dump her body in a pond. However, Diane found this story so unbelievable that she chose not to warn anyone about the potential danger. When the Jamie Fuller was arrested, he faced charges of first-degree murder. Jamie smiled throughout the court proceedings and even made jokes about the victim, showing no signs of regret or remorse. During his interrogation, he remained calm and attempted to shift the blame to his friends for Amy's murder. However, when other people close to the victim were questioned, it came to light that Michael had boasted about helping Jamie dispose of the body after the murder. He was subsequently arrested for being an accomplice. It was obvious that the remaining two friends could have been witnesses to the massacre but never reported it to the police. They also knew about their friend's intentions, which he had openly discussed. Nearly a year after Amy's funeral, a witness named Scott Ward gave an interview to a local newspaper. He expressed disbelief over the events and felt guilty for not sounding the alarm sooner, which might have prevented the tragedy. At that time, he was already under investigation. Other teenagers suggested that Michael was not as innocent as he appeared. They claimed he encouraged the murder of the girl and hinted that his involvement in the crime could be more significant than he admitted. Ultimately, the police determined that only Michael and Jamie were responsible for the murder, while the others were not connected to the crime and were not arrested. Public outrage grew as people needed to know the truth and find ways to protect their communities from criminals who would harm schoolgirls for no reason. Locals had good reason to believe that all four teenagers were involved in the tragedy. The boys' parents, however, maintained their son's innocence and denied any involvement in the crime. However, police had evidence that Jamie had openly discussed his plans throughout the day. His friends even pressured him to act on them. This behavior showed Jamie was struggling and felt compelled to prove his strength. What motivated Amy's murder? Was it jealousy, a psychotic episode, a desire to harm his child, or provocation? Although the young man was only 16 at the time of the crime, he was tried as an adult. Jamie maintained his innocence and was released on bail of $2,500, which his mother paid. His lawyers pointed out that he had consumed alcohol, and they argued that the combination with steroids could lead to uncontrollable aggression. Therefore, the defense aimed to classify the crime as non-premeditated murder due to insanity, claiming that excessive steroid use can result in psychosis and other mental health issues. The lawyers requested a psychiatric evaluation for Jamie, which involved several assessments by independent experts. All concluded that Jamie was mentally stable and fit to stand trial. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office argued that the attack was motivated by jealousy. They highlighted the manipulative behavior, strict control, and ongoing assaults that the Amy had endured in the months leading up to the incident. According to Michael's confession, Jamie sought revenge because Amy attended a beach party with her friends. Another friend in the group said Jamie believed that Amy's pregnancy had to be terminated at all costs. The prosecution presented several witnesses, including Jamie's friend Ronald, who had taken carpentry classes with him. In the spring of 1991, Ronald testified in court about Amy's pregnancy. During this testimony, Jamie allegedly mentioned that the only way to get rid of the baby was to kill Amy. Dominic, who was with them that night, testified that he saw Jamie and his girlfriend go into the woods. He then heard some screaming. Dominic then noticed that Jamie had blood on her clothes and hands. Jamie even showed them the bloody knife he used in the attack. The blade was disfigured, indicating extreme violence. Dominic confirmed what Michael had said. Jamie recounted the details of the massacre he had committed. He explained that he first gagged Amy, professed his love for her, and then stabbed her in the stomach. Even then, she was still alive when he slit her throat. Amy told him that she still loved him, which made Jamie so angry that he stomped on her neck and started jumping on her head. The young witnesses claimed that Jamie was sober throughout the attack. They had only consumed alcohol after the murder. Jamie's mother had previously told police that alcohol had a negative effect on him, leading to anger and aggression. She recounted an incident where he nearly destroyed her room in a drunken fight with her. However, alcohol was not a factor in this situation. The forensic expert who testified for the prosecution explained that the stab wound was so deep that it almost went all the way through Amy's body, indicating a high level of hatred behind the murder. There were no signs of sexual violence, suggesting the attack may have been motivated by revenge or jealousy. One of the stab wounds penetrated the bone, disfiguring the knife point, and Amy had extensive bruising on her face and head injuries. Jamie, speaking to the media, claimed that he could not kill Amy because he still loved her. This claim was a lie. His televised declaration of love shocked and devastated Amy's mother, who was struggling to cope with her loss, resorting to sedatives and seeking help from a psychologist. To her, Jamie's display of love was a cruel taunt. The hearing lasted 7 days, after which the jury began deliberating its verdict. The prosecution argued that the Jamie was an extremely dangerous individual with the potential to become a serial killer and called for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The defense, in contrast, argued that the young man had lost control due to steroid abuse. The jury deliberated for 2 days, taking about 6 hours to reach a decision. Jamie was found guilty on October 23, 1992, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a separate decision involving Jamie's friend, Michael, who had helped destroy evidence, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison after a hearing on his involvement. The victim's mother, Amy, felt this was an unfairly light sentence for his role in the crime. In 2013, new state laws were enacted that allowed minors convicted of serious offenses to apply for parole. Under these laws, each case had to be assessed individually. As a result of this legal change, Jamie, who had spent most of his adult life in prison, was given the chance for release in 2019 when he was 40 years old. Jamie's request for parole was reviewed but has been postponed indefinitely. The family of the brutal massacre victim has repeatedly appealed to law enforcement, demanding that this brutal man not be released under any circumstances. As of now, he is still incarcerated. Amy's mother struggled to cope with her daughter's death, requiring regular visits to a psychiatrist and a significant amount of medication. In 2009, her health declined rapidly, leading to her passing at the age of 57. Her family believes that her early death was directly linked to the loss of her beloved daughter. Hey detectives! Welcome back. we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ayla Reynolds. Ayla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, Maine, USA. With blonde hair, blue eyes, and a charming smile, she was an adorable child who loved music and dancing. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, had a brief romantic relationship in the summer of 2009, which resulted in Trista becoming pregnant. However, the couple broke up and Justin was initially a bit apprehensive about becoming a father, even doubting whether he was really the biological father of the child. When Trista gave birth to Ayla, the child bore a strong resemblance to Justin, but he initially refused to acknowledge Ayla as his daughter. However, after a paternity test in July 2010, Justin finally accepted his role as her father. As a result, Child Protective Services ordered Justin to pay child support in December 2010. Although Trista and Justin did not have a formal custody agreement in court, they did have an agreement in which Trista, who resided in Portland, would have primary physical custody. It was not until mid-2011, after Ayla's first birthday, that Justin began spending time with his daughter. Since he lived an hour and a half away and visits were scheduled to be during the day and very brief, they agreed that Justin could occasionally take Ayla with him but never overnight. Trista gave birth to her first child, Ayla. Soon after, she became pregnant with her new boyfriend Raymond's child. In 2011, Trista had her second child, a son named Raymond Jr., and Ayla became a big sister. Trista cared for both children until October 13, 2011, when Child Protective Services intervened due to concerns. The details of the complaint that led to the meeting are unclear, but it is known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave her an ultimatum: overcome her addiction or lose custody of her children. In order to avoid losing custody, Trista entered a 10-day rehabilitation program and left the children in the care of her mother and sister. Ayla and Raymond Jr. were her world, and she was determined not to lose them. By October 2011, Justin had seen Ayla about 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista was taken into custody, on October 17, Justin and his family decided to take custody of Ayla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DiPietro, contacted Child Protective Services and was approved to take Ayla. The agency promptly notified Trista's relatives of the decision. However, Ayla's aunt, Jessica, strongly disagreed with Child Protective Services' decision, accusing Justin of abusing Ayla in the past and expressing concerns for the child's well-being. The officials argued that a father had more custody rights than an aunt. After being granted permission, Justin and his family went to pick up Ayla, but they did not know the exact address. To resolve the issue, Child Protective officials provided the location through Officer Charles Weaver. Officer Charles accompanied Justin and his mother to Jessica's home, where Ayla was staying with her aunt. While the grandmother waited in the car, Justin and Officer Charles approached the door. A dramatic scene ensued as Jessica pleaded with the police not to take Ayla away, warning that she would not give up the child willingly. Despite the stress, police observed that Ayla appeared to be very happy, constantly laughing, playing, and even trying to strike up a conversation. Trista's sister, Jessica, asked the police to observe how Ayla's behavior changed when Justin arrived. When Justin approached, Ayla immediately began crying and tried to get away from him. Despite her distress, the police handed Ayla over to her father. Ayla struggled and screamed, even trying to bite the police officer when she was placed in Justin's arms. Jessica explained to Officer Charles that Ayla was extremely afraid of her father and that it was not in her best interest to take the child away from her family. Charles explained that if it were up to him, he would not let Ayla go with Justin, but that it was not his decision and that he was there to enforce the directive from Child Services. In order to transfer custody, one option is to reach an agreement with the child's mother or seek the judge's approval through a court proceeding. However, In a recent custody exchange, neither of these steps were taken. Instead, the decision was made by the Child Protective Services supervisor. Unfortunately, the supervisor awarded custody to the child's father, Justin. Before the court grants sole custody to a parent, it typically conducts a thorough evaluation, including a background check and home visit. However, this did not occur in Ayla's case. The primary consideration in custody decisions is the best interests of the child, but there are no records to support the decision made in Ayla's case. Analysts say the only reason to remove a child from her maternal relatives is if the child is in imminent danger. If officials believed Ayla was in danger, it is unclear why her younger brother, Raymond Jr., was not removed from the home. The father took her to his family home in Waterville. His 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Alicia, and her young daughter, Gabriella, also lived there. Justin, the 25-year-old father, lived in a basement, a large, partially finished room, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. Trista called Justin every day during his rehabilitation to talk to Ayla and make sure everything was okay. She did not notice anything unusual in these calls. On October 20, 2011, when Trista was on her 8th day of treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Ayla's situation. Attendees included members of Child Protective Services, 2 doctors, Trista, her sister Jessica, an attorney, and Justin, who participated by phone. As a result of the discussion, an agreement was reached that Ayla would be returned to Trista on October 22, 2011, after completing her addiction recovery program. It was also decided that Justin would take Ayla to a treatment center on October 21 to visit her mother. Although things initially seemed to be going well for Trista, the situation soon took a turn for the worse, with no agreement being made and implemented. Trista desperately sought the help of Child Protective Services to enforce their original agreement, but her repeated calls were unsuccessful. So she proposed a temporary solution to Justin. He would continue to care for their daughter, and she would have regular visitation rights to Ayla. However, on November 12, 2011, Justin took their daughter to the emergency room after she was injured. After conducting relevant tests, doctors determined that she had a broken arm. Justin told the doctor that the accident happened the night before, November 11th. It was raining, he said, and he slipped and fell on her while on the porch with Ayla in his arms. He added that although the girl was crying, she did not appear to be injured, and it was not until the next morning that it became clear that she needed urgent medical attention. By the following Monday, the orthopedist said that surgery was not necessary and that the injury would heal on its own. A week later, on November 26th, at a third medical appointment to assess the child's progress, the specialist said everything was going according to plan. Trista was present at that medical appointment to closely monitor her daughter's recovery, never thinking that it would be the last time she would hold her. The mother's decision to seek custody of Ayla marked a turning point. On December 15, 2011, she filed a petition with the court to begin the custody process due to ongoing disputes over visitation and communication with her daughter. Just 2 days later, on December 17, 2011, Justin contacted the police, reporting Ayla missing from his mother's home, where he was staying with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and his sister Alicia. According to Justin, Ayla had been put to bed the night before, but when they woke up, the 20-month-old was no longer there. That morning, Trista had gone to visit her husband Raymond at a correctional facility in a coastal Maine town near the Canadian border. Raymond was serving time for arson. Trista was in the passenger seat, asleep, while her father-in-law, Robert Fourier, drove. Robert receives a call from Trista's father with alarming news: Trista's child, Ayla, is missing. Robert is momentarily stunned by the news, then finds a safe place to stop the car and wake Trista. Still half asleep, Trista hears her father's voice on the phone and tries to grasp the terrible news of her child's disappearance. Panicked, She immediately instructs Robert to change direction and go meet the police who are looking for Ayla. Trista's hour-and-a-half journey feels like a century as she anxiously tries to contact Justin, growing increasingly frightened when he does not answer her calls. Upon arriving at the police station, Trista and her father-in-law, Robert, give their statements. 30 minutes later, Trista's father joins them. Justin called 911 at 8:49 a.m. that morning to report her missing, saying that Ayla was last seen the night before at 10 p.m. by Justin's sister, Alicia, who had gone to check on Ayla before going to bed. However, by Saturday morning, Ayla had disappeared from her crib, with Justin not specifying the exact time she had gone missing in the call. Justin's theory was that Ayla had been abducted by a stranger. As news of her disappearance quickly spread, the police quickly launched an investigation. In a statement to the media, the police chief assured that they were working diligently to find Ayla at all costs. To aid in the search, the police thoroughly searched the house for any potential clues that could lead them to Ayla. On the second day of the search, Sunday, December 18th, trained search dogs were brought in to assist. The area around the house where Ayla was last seen was thoroughly searched and a detailed search was conducted at Trista's home. Due to the search, Trista had to temporarily stay in a motel with her mother and youngest son. By December 19th, the third day after the disappearance, the FBI was brought in to assist in the search. By this time, approximately 75 people from various agencies were involved in the investigation. State police had seized 2 vehicles from Justin's home, a 1996 Ford Explorer owned by Justin and a silver 4-door sedan owned by Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who had been present the night of the disappearance. The news quickly attracted local media attention, and in the days that followed, Trista appeared in several local media outlets, criticizing Justin and implying that he was responsible for the disappearance. As the news spread nationwide, Trista continued to express her concerns, saying that Justin, as the last person to see her daughter alive, was the only one who could answer her questions. Finally, Justin released a statement to the media on Wednesday, asserting that he knew nothing about Ayla's disappearance and assuring the public that he and his family would cooperate fully with the investigation to ensure Ayla's safe return. However, in his statement, Justin admitted that Ayla was in his sole custody at the time of her disappearance. But he lied, saying this was achieved through an agreement with the mother. Furthermore, he added that Trista was incapable of caring for the child. As time went on, the search effort expanded. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, CARD, canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on every door. They contacted every household, returned to the area multiple times, and interviewed neighbors to gather vital information. With a team of 75 dedicated officers, the police demonstrated their unwavering commitment to solving the case. Within 10 days of Justin's initial report, police had spent approximately 5,000 hours searching and were actively pursuing 330 leads. A massive search effort for Ayla involved approximately 50 civilian volunteers from a search and rescue association. In addition, a $30,000 reward was offered to anyone who could provide valuable information that could assist in finding Ayla. Ayla's devoted mother, Trista, played a key role in bringing the case to the forefront. She worked with the support group to organize numerous events, such as vigils and parades, to honor Ayla's memory. Her persistence ensured that the case remained in the public eye, with news cameras continuing to cover the story. Trista, along with other spokespeople, provided reporters with updates to keep the story on the front page. Initially, police treating the case as a missing persons investigation rather than a homicide. However, began to change when police sealed off Justin's home and the surrounding area. Police also seized his car and made a major announcement, further altering the public's perception of the case at the direction of the head of the Criminal Prosecution Agency, who made a public announcement. The police officially ruled out the possibility that Ayla had run away on her own. On the 13th day of the investigation, the sheriff transferred the case to the state police's Major Crimes Unit. In this announcement, a difficult reality was revealed. The case had been moved from a missing persons investigation to a criminal investigation. In the early days, Justin kept a low profile and avoided the media, but over time, he began to appear more frequently. In one of his interviews on the Today Show, he addressed the change in the law enforcement message, asserting that Ayla had been kidnapped and begging the person who kidnapped her to bring her home. He stated that he went on the show to approach whoever kidnapped his daughter and tell them that their actions were wrong. He stressed that they had no right to make such a decision because they were not her father and stressed that Ayla needed to stay home with her family. When asked about his previous silence, Justin admitted that he had refrained from speaking out because he initially thought Ayla would return. He said that the police had advised him to stay away from the media, a part confirmed by a Department of Public Safety spokesperson. The spokesperson clarified that this advice was only given initially and that the police had later encouraged Ayla's parents to make more public appearances. Justin addressed the allegations against him directly. He invited the TV host to spend a day with him to see firsthand what he was going through. He expressed his appreciation for the police's efforts. Justin stressed that the truth remains the same, no matter how many times someone may be accused or called a liar. He believes that the truth is patient and will eventually come out. In late January, police announced that Ayla's blood had been found in several locations in Justin's home. They also indicated that, although there was not enough evidence to make an arrest, Justin, Courtney, and Alicia, the three adults who lived in the home where Ayla was last seen, were considered suspects. Stephen McCausland, a spokesman for the Department of Public Safety, stated that the family's account of the events was not supported by any forensic evidence, dismissing the possibility that someone had broken into Ayla's bedroom undetected and taken her while the three adults were in the home. 6 months after Ayla was reported missing. On May 30, 2012, police stated that there was no possibility that she was still alive. Trista's family allowed reporters into their home for a press conference announcing the news. Upon hearing the news, Trista immediately burst into tears, which quickly turned to anger as she accused Justin of killing her daughter. For Trista's family, learning the details of the forensic tests conducted at Justin's home was extremely difficult. They knew that Ayla's blood had been found and that the amount of blood represented 25% of her total blood volume. However, they never saw the evidence until January 2013, when everything that had been discovered was revealed to them. Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer had a child seat in the back, where Ayla's blood was found on the left shoulder strap. Dried vomit was also found in the back seat. In the girl's bedroom, police discovered blood on her princess pink sneakers, which were on the floor next to her crib, as well as on the face and arms of her doll. They believe she may have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. A blood stain was also found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood was found in a basement, where a pool of Ayla's blood was found in the middle of the mattress Justin shared with Courtney. In addition, vomit and a pink strand that looked like the hair of a toy were found on the bed. Justin's sneakers, which had Ayla's blood on the tongue and inside, were found next to the bed. There were also blood stains on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls, which corresponded to Ayla's height. An expert determined that some of the blood drops were the size of a dime, indicating blunt force trauma. Furthermore, experts pointed out that some of the blood spatter in the house could have been caused by Ayla's coughing, suggesting that she had suffered both internal and external injuries. Police said that they had used bed sheets to clean up Ayla's blood. This was a horrifying revelation for Trista and her family, and they still had many more disturbing details to learn. Luminol tests conducted in the house revealed traces of blood that were not visible to the naked eye. The photo slides from the house left Trista deeply distressed. She panicked and left the police station, now more convinced than ever that her daughter, Ayla, had been murdered. The police wanted to show her more photos, but she refused, saying she had seen enough. Months earlier, when the police presented the same photographic evidence, he showed no reaction. The police also tried to show Justin's family the photos. They refused. They were not interested. Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who was with him the night Ayla disappeared, reacted in a similar way. Overwhelmed and helpless, Trista told the press that Justin, Alicia, and Courtney were still walking down the street as if nothing had happened. 8 months after receiving a critical report in September 2013, Trista decided to write a letter to the press about the evidence and photos she had seen. She was frustrated by the slow progress and wanted to rekindle public interest in the case. In the spring of 2016, a group of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. His younger sister, Alicia, answered the door and was asked about the journalist who asked about the blood evidence. She mentioned that Ayla was lactose intolerant and had been throwing up. However, a quick online search revealed that common symptoms of lactose intolerance include gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. While nausea and vomiting can occur, they are not the most typical symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. In 2017, at Trista's request, a judge officially declared Ayla dead, determining that her death occurred on or about December 17, 2011, when her father, Justin, reported her missing. With this declaration, Trista and her attorney filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin, claiming he caused Ayla's death through intentional unlawful acts and caused her pain and suffering before her death, including fear, terror, and physical injury. At the time of the lawsuit, Ayla was still missing, and Justin, along with his attorney, denied any wrongdoing, describing the lawsuit as baseless. In response, Trista held a press conference where she addressed Justin directly, questioning whether he had a conscience. She said, "I could see it in your eyes, and you knew it was a problem. You looked at me, and I knew you cared." In early 2023, a judge granted Trista's request to add his mother, Phoebe, and his sister, Alicia, to the wrongful death lawsuit. The 3 defendants are now facing civil charges of wrongful death, intentional infliction of pain and suffering, and unlawful interference with the body of a deceased person. Additionally, Justin faces charges of failing to fulfill his parental duty of care to a minor child. Trista and her attorney understand that they will not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That is not the purpose of the lawsuit. Their purpose is to learn the truth behind Ayla's disappearance. There are many strange things about Ayla's disappearance. The police informed Trista of a shocking detail. On the morning Ayla went missing, Justin drove to Portland and back before calling 911. He claimed that he thought Trista had kidnapped Ayla and was looking for Trista, but he never contacted her or any of her family members. Instead, during that long drive, he called a friend who had sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Ayla just weeks earlier. Adding to the strangeness, Justin stayed at this friend's house while the police were investigating the case. This was surprising, especially since he had been absent from his daughter's life for 9 months of Trista's pregnancy and for most of Ayla's life. Trista also shared that she had received strange text messages from Justin in the week after Ayla went missing. He expressed fears that someone might try to kidnap Ayla. The last time he mentioned someone trying to kidnap her was on December 11th, just 6 days before Ayla was reported missing. After her disappearance, his messages became threatening and cryptic, leaving Trista wondering what he really meant. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheila Labar. Sheila Labar was born in Fort Payne, Alabama on July 4, 1958. She was the youngest of 3 children and grew up on a farm surrounded by cornfields with her siblings, including her older brother and sister Lynn. According to Lynn, her older sibling, Sheila was an energetic, inquisitive, and creative girl. She loved being the center of attention, had a beautiful singing voice, and was very pretty. Her father Manuel Bailey's struggle with alcoholism had a profound impact on his family, especially his children, during their formative years. When affected, he became extremely aggressive and abusive, directing his anger at his wife and children. He would insult and humiliate them, attack them with any available object, and even force them to sleep outdoors, enduring the elements. Many times, Manuel's wife and children had no choice but to seek shelter in barns or fields, enduring harsh weather conditions such as heavy rain or freezing temperatures. Manuel's violent outbursts were a regular occurrence in the family. On one occasion, he threw dishes and objects at family members in a drunken rage. The mother tried to shield her children but was unsuccessful. A flower pot hit the youngest daughter, Sheila, in the head, causing her a severe concussion and leaving a permanent scar on her temple that she later covered with her hair. However, physical abuse was not the only trauma the sisters endured. According to Sheila and Lynn's memories, Manuel forced them into forced sex from a young age. Even though the mother may have known what was going on, she never addressed the problem or sought help for her daughters. Sheila studied very well, finding solace in her academic achievements in the midst of a difficult family life. She dreamed of escaping the countryside to pursue her ambitions in the city. With fierce determination and intense passion, Sheila aspired to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or a pop singer. She had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a wonderful voice. Sheila's upbringing was tumultuous. At the age of 18, she left her parents' house, but adult life was difficult. She did not pass the university entrance exam because of her average grades, and she simply did not have the money to move to the big city. Therefore, Sheila took a job as a maid in a hotel where her sister worked. Sheila had a slim figure and a very attractive appearance, big blue eyes, a charming smile, and long, thick hair. She was given attention by men, and over time, she learned to use that attention and manipulate her suitors. Sheila met Jonathan Baxter in the late 1970s and they began a romantic relationship. Although Jonathan was not yet 20 years old, he had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a barrier, and the couple soon married. However, their marriage did not last long and ended in divorce within a few months. The reason for the breakup was Sheila's treatment of Jonathan's daughter. She often became frustrated with the child and resorted to physical discipline, such as hitting her, or isolation, such as locking her in a closet when the child misbehaved or cried. When Jonathan discovered this, he was extremely distressed and immediately filed for divorce. He acted quickly, removing Sheila and her belongings from the house and making it clear that he never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila continued to date many men, and she often relied on them financially, but these relationships did not last long, lasting only a few weeks to a few months. However, in the early 1980s, she met Ronnie Jennings, who would later become her second husband. Their tumultuous love affair soon led to marriage. Unfortunately, it was an unhealthy relationship between two erratic and unstable people who often cheated on each other, caused scandals, and even fought. However, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after an argument, Sheila asked her husband for a divorce. But he refused. However, Ronnie's motive behind refusing her request was not to save the relationship. He just wanted to irritate his wife and drive her crazy. He succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large amount of drugs in front of her husband, drank strong alcohol, and after this terrifying cocktail, got behind the wheel and drove off the road. As expected, Sheila lost consciousness shortly after and drove off the road at high speed, crashing into a tree. Despite the severity of the accident, Sheila miraculously survived, although she suffered severe head injuries that left her in a deep coma for over a week. During this time, medical professionals were unable to give any prognosis for her recovery. Sheila eventually recovered from her coma and was transferred to a psychiatric hospital, where she remained for several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the attendants was constantly harassing her. After all this, she was discharged from the hospital and returned to her second husband's home. But her behavior became increasingly erratic. She began to act aggressively and threaten him, culminating in a violent outburst in which she attacked Ronnie with nail scissors, stabbing him in the chest. Fearing for her safety and well-being, Ronnie filed for divorce and quickly moved away, ending their tumultuous relationship. After her second divorce, Sheila began looking for a lover through the dating columns of print newspapers and left her information there. She posted her information herself in the hope of meeting someone special, but her relationships did not last long. The reason was that she had a controlling personality, often dominating her partners in both her private and daily life. One day, a 60-year-old man named Wilfred Bill Labar happened to see her picture in the dating section. A twice-divorced man, Wilfred raised his children and grandchildren from previous marriages. After losing his wife a few years ago, he lived a solitary life on his large rural farm. Wilfred, a wealthy man from New Hampshire, owned a chiropractic practice and a horse farm. Despite his successful life, he still felt lonely and longed for a partner. It was then that he met Sheila, who was attracted by Wilfred's wealth and saw an opportunity for her. To attract his attention, Sheila began sending him provocative letters and photos through the post. Her plan worked, and soon Wilfred invited her to visit his farm. Their romance quickly blossomed, with Wilfred showering her with expensive gifts. In the summer of 1987, Sheila moved in with him. Wilfred Bill Labar had no plans to marry Sheila. However, without waiting for his proposal, Sheila changed her name, calling herself Labar. Bill was surprised by this development, but he did not object. As their relationship progressed, Sheila began to control Wilfred's life, including his business, finances, and property. Due to the significant age difference, Wilfred had a hard time satisfying Sheila's need for intimacy. According to Sheila, Wilfred allowed her to see other men, and she often brought her lovers to their homes. One of Sheila's lovers, who was in his mid-90s, was a Jamaican citizen named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as a nanny at the farm. Wayne eventually moved into the main house with Wilfred's consent, possibly under pressure from Sheila. Sheila and Wayne married in 1995 with an agreement that they would be monogamous, and Wayne assumed that from then on, he would be her only man. However, he soon realized that he was wrong as his wife continued to see other men. Wayne was not happy with this, and one day, he punched and kicked Sheila and her next lover, injuring them. Sheila, accustomed to being dominated, was the first time she had been attacked by someone else. She eventually filed for divorce and obtained a court order to prevent Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Sheila's life remained volatile despite the divorce, as she continued to have affairs, frequently ending old relationships in favor of new ones. However, her relationships became increasingly complicated, often ending in lawsuits from her ex-partners who accused her of cruelty, threatening their lives, and causing physical harm. In one case, an ex-boyfriend claimed she deliberately hit him with her car, narrowly avoiding serious injury. Another accused her of fracturing his skull, while a third partner was left permanently scarred by lacerations to his face. As Sheila got older, her behavior became increasingly dangerous to those around her. She demanded absolute obedience from her partners, and when this expectation was not met, she often flew into rages. Wilfred Bill Labar then died in 2000 of heart failure at the age of 74. Although doctors and police found no evidence of foul play in his death, his family believed that Sheila had something to do with it. According to them, she had been poisoning Bill little by little over the years, effectively driving him to his death. After Wilfred's death, Sheila became the sole beneficiary of his estate, even though the couple had never formally married. Relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They still believe that Sheila forced him to write a will. She wanted the house after Wilfred's death. After inheriting his entire estate, Sheila was free to do whatever she wanted without having to consider anyone else's opinion. She called her home a place of glamour and pleasure where there were no inhibitions. And she began picking up men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, luring them to her and then trying to keep them at the farm for as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or appearance. Sheila lured these men with promises of extraordinary pleasure and then tried to dominate and control them. Neighbors noticed that there were many different men constantly coming to the farm, but many left that day, while others stayed for a short time. The activities inside the house were shrouded in mystery. Sheila then turned her focus to finding sexual partners among men who were in financial trouble, needed a place to live, or were struggling with addiction. These people are easy targets for Sheila's manipulation tactics, as she presents herself as a wealthy widow, bragging about her supposed inheritance from 2004. A homeless man named Michael DeLog is struggling with addiction when he meets Sheila on a city street. Due to his circumstances, his family tries to get him into rehab, but he escapes from the treatment center. Michael's weakness leads him to accept Sheila's offer, who promises him food, shelter, and the stimulants he desires in exchange for a physical relationship. Moving to the farm, Michael becomes completely dependent on his lover. Afraid of being on the streets again, he complies with her every demand, and Sheila's desires become more sophisticated. She binds, beats, and humiliates Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they would not believe him. Sheila repeatedly found Michael and brought him back to the farm. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. They responded immediately, but unfortunately, it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLog mysteriously disappeared. When his family contacted Sheila, she claimed that they had broken up and Michael had left her, not knowing where he was. Despite efforts to find him, Michael was nowhere to be seen and no one he knew had seen him. Unfortunately, attempts to contact him were unsuccessful and the police report was fruitless, and Sheila remained unsuspected. While her house and car needed maintenance, so she was forced to find work. She chose a career that suited her, becoming an operator for intimate telephone services, using her charming voice to make a living. A man named Kenneth County, then 24 years old, fell into the trap and agreed to meet her in person. Kenneth was an attractive young man, kind and open, but he had one major weakness: his low IQ made him extremely gullible. This made him Sheila's ideal target. Kenneth was very close to his mother, financially dependent on her, but Sheila skillfully manipulated him, creating a rift between them and finally conquered him. She gave him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams. He informed his relatives, and then moved into Sheila's house. After that, Sheila severely and relentlessly abused Kenneth. She had turned one of the rooms in her house into a torture chamber, where she regularly beat Kenneth severely and subjected him to other forms of physical and mental abuse. As a result, Kenneth's body was covered in numerous injuries, including bruises, abrasions, cuts, and burns. Kenneth was completely under Sheila's control and was not allowed to contact his loved ones. His family had no idea what was happening to him and could only speculate about his condition. It was only when neighbors occasionally saw Kenneth and were shocked by his frail appearance that the alarm was raised. Just days before Kenneth went missing, a local store employee took a disturbing photo of him with his cell phone, which was later used as evidence in court. The photo showed Kenneth extremely thin, with large bruises under his eyes and on his cheeks, and what appeared to be a broken nose, judging by the extent of the healing. All of these injuries occurred at different times, suggesting that he had been severely beaten over a long period of time. When he went to a store, the items in his trolley were disturbing: 2 large fuel drums, which were later discovered to have been used to cremate him. The store staff were confused and frightened by his appearance, so they contacted the police, suspecting a possible domestic violence incident. However, Sheila escaped and they were unable to charge her. Eventually, Kenneth lost contact with his family, and when his worried mother visited him at the farm owner, Sheila, responded aggressively and advised her to leave Kenneth alone, prompting Kenneth's family to file a missing person report. Expressing concern that he might be being held against his will at the farm. When the police arrived at Sheila's home, they witnessed a crematorium and disturbing discoveries. Sheila claimed that Kenneth had moved away because his mother, whom he said was afraid of him, had begun visiting regularly. To back up her claim, Sheila provided a recording in which she asked Kenneth if his mother had attacked him, and he quietly replied yes. The police found Sheila's story suspicious, and the next day, a police officer who visited Sheila obtained a search warrant for the estate. This was not the first time Sheila had attracted the attention of the police. She had been implicated in the mysterious disappearance of another boyfriend in the past. However, despite her past, Sheila had never been questioned or had her property searched until now. When the police arrived, they could not find Sheila at home, but they did notice several suspicious fires burning near the outbuildings. These fires were very unusual and involved a variety of materials such as mattresses, pieces of wooden furniture, hay, and other items soaked in flammable substances. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that one of the fires contained human remains in the form of bones. Police immediately requested additional assistance from forensic experts to document their findings, but what they discovered next was even more shocking. Police found numerous blood stains that had not been cleaned up throughout the house, indicating a violent crime had occurred. The large amount of blood suggested that a horrific massacre may have occurred. The blood found at the scene belonged to at least 3 different people. The body found in a fire was identified as that of the missing Kenneth County. 2 empty fuel cans were discovered nearby, matching the cans Kenneth had purchased at a local store the day before his disappearance. Further investigation uncovered the body of Michael DeLog, who had been missing for several years. Police also found several fingers belonging to an unidentified third person. In addition, a large number of items, believed to have belonged to several men due to their varying sizes, were recovered from the farm's storage pit, but their owners remain unknown. Sheila was not present at the time of the police visit, as she had already discovered them and planned to flee. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston to evade arrest. Along the way, she hitched a ride with a driver and eventually formed a relationship with him, leading him to invite her to stay with him. However, the next day, after watching a TV news report about a manhunt for a dangerous criminal, the driver called the police and reported that Sheila was currently in his bed. A disturbing discovery was made during the search of Sheila's home, a collection of videotapes. The recordings depicted men, including Kenneth, Michael, and several others, confessing to serious crimes. However, the men's visible distress and condition suggested that these confessions had been coerced through torture. After Sheila was arrested, concerns about her mental health prompted the court to order an evaluation. The results showed that Sheila suffered from delusional disorder and symptoms of schizophrenia. She believed that she was an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. Her attorney used her poor mental health to create a defense, portraying her as terminally ill and unaware of her actions. This claim was based on severe mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. Sheila claimed that, years earlier, she had had a near-death experience after being in an accident and falling into a coma. During this time, she said, she encountered God and was tasked with ridding the world of men who harmed children. Sheila's ex-husbands and several of her lovers also took the stand in court, all of whom described her as insane, unstable, and extremely violent. In particular, her third husband, Wayne Anise, claimed that Sheila had repeatedly urged him to kill Wilfred Bill Labar, apparently motivated by his desire to take his estate. However, the defense team's efforts to portray Sheila as insane and in need of psychiatric care were unsuccessful. Instead, it was determined that she was fully aware of her actions when she committed the crime. Sheila was ultimately convicted in July 2008 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Any appeals she filed were subsequently denied. Sheila is currently serving her sentence at the Homestead Correctional Facility in Florida. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Greenberg was born in June 1993 in New York to Santa and George Greenberg. She is an only child and grew up in a loving environment. During her high school years, she was very active in sports. Ellen was very sociable and also did well in her studies. After finishing high school, she attended Pennsylvania State University. However, when she started working in her field, Ellen realized that it was not her true passion. While working, Ellen also enrolled in a correspondence course at a teacher training academy. A few years later, she successfully completed her degree and moved to Philadelphia, where she became a junior high school teacher at a local school. Ellen's life was going well. She truly enjoyed working with her students. During this time, Ellen began a relationship with a young man named Samuel, also known as Sam Goldberg. He came from a wealthy and prominent family. Samuel's parents owned a large business and his uncle was known as one of the best lawyers in the state. Ellen and Samuel met at a party in 2009 through friends and quickly developed feelings for each other. Their relationship quickly developed and they later decided to live together. In 2011, Samuel proposed to Ellen with a diamond ring. The happy couple began planning their wedding, scheduled for the spring of that year. In January 2011, Ellen went to work at school as usual, but around noon, a strong wind and snowstorm caused classes to be canceled and both students and teachers were sent home. Ellen returned to her apartment, and then suddenly, Samuel also returned home. At 5 p.m., Samuel decided to go to the gym in their apartment complex. Samuel was gone for less than an hour, but when he returned, he found the apartment door locked from the inside and could not be entered. Samuel knocked loudly on the door and called Ellen's name. He then tried calling and texting Ellen, but there was no response. Samuel went down to the first floor to ask the security guard for help. Samuel explained the situation and asked the guard to open the door first. But the guard said that it was against his rules because he could not leave his post. Samuel then returned to his floor. He banged his shoulder on the door and on his first try, he broke the latch. It was very quiet inside. When he entered the kitchen, he saw a horrifying scene of Ellen lying on the floor, leaning against the cupboard door, her body stabbed multiple times and her clothes soaked in blood. Samuel quickly called an ambulance. When asked to check Ellen's pulse, Samuel hesitated and kept wondering if he really needed to do so. After a moment of silence, Samuel suddenly said that there was a knife protruding from Ellen's chest. Police arriving at the scene were surprised to find the door locked from the inside with a bolt, which Samuel had pushed open with his shoulder. There was no sign of forced entry or any intruder in the room. Nothing had been stolen from the apartment. During Ellen's autopsy, there were no signs of struggle or any attempt to defend herself, suggesting that the incident occurred suddenly and the victim had no time to react. Ellen's autopsy found about 20 stab wounds of varying depth, the fatal stab wound to her heart. Ellen struggled with anxiety and panic attacks. The situation became so severe that she sought the help of a psychologist. The initial assumption of the police, before the autopsy, was that Ellen had committed suicide. Ellen's therapist prescribed 2 anti-anxiety medications, which she took regularly. The psychologist confirmed that the medications would not affect Ellen's mental state or lead to thoughts of death. Despite her anxiety, Ellen never voiced such thoughts. Additionally, Ellen's friends and colleagues noticed that after she and Samuel began living together, her behavior began to change. Along with becoming anxious and restless, Ellen's parents also noticed similar strange behavior. 3 weeks before the tragedy, Ellen told her mother that she wanted to quit school, give up everything, and move back in with her parents. Her mother was surprised by this and assured Ellen that she could come home at any time. After the couple moved in together, Samuel began to act violently toward Ellen, leaving her fearful and reluctant to speak up. Ellen's psychologist noted that Ellen had difficulty expressing her feelings and experiences. It seemed as though she wanted to reveal something important, but fear held her back. The lack of care in the examination of the crime scene and body, as well as the subsequent investigation, was astonishing. Many important details, events, and evidence were overlooked or lost, making it impossible to reconstruct the full details of the incident. Initially, there were no defensive wounds on Ellen's hands. Many bruises were found on her body, and the degree of healing suggested that they had occurred several weeks ago. Samuel claimed that these injuries could have been caused by playing sports. However, Ellen's parents said that their daughter had not been to the gym or the playground for quite some time. Soon after the investigation began, the possibility of suicide was raised. Ellen had approximately 20 penetrating wounds of varying depths, and forensic analysis showed that 10 of these wounds were from the back. If Ellen had been attacked from behind and suffered serious injuries, even if they did not kill Ellen immediately, they would have likely limited her ability to move and resist. It is highly unlikely that someone would inflict such wounds on themselves and then stab themselves deep into the heart, leading medical experts to question the cause of death. The investigation still did not result in criminal charges. As there was no trace of a stranger in the apartment, nor any sign of self-defense. Although the victim's wife or partner is often the prime suspect in these cases, Samuel was never a suspect. No charges were ever brought against Samuel, and he was only questioned at the police station on the day of the incident, along with his uncle, a prominent lawyer. The events of that day were reconstructed entirely from Samuel's account, which was sometimes unclear. But he attributed his confusion to stress. Neighbors reported only that they heard knocking and screaming from Samuel when he could not get into the apartment and was trying to call Ellen. Samuel claimed that he asked a security guard for help, that the security guard accompanied him down the stairs, and that the security guard witnessed Samuel kicking down a door. However, the security guard denied this claim, claiming that he never left his post. Regardless, the police did not look into the matter further, considering it irrelevant. Only a surveillance camera leading to the gym was examined, which showed Samuel walking toward the gym and then returning. Samuel may have escaped by another route and then returned to the gym the same way. However, his alibi was not investigated, and witnesses who confirmed that Samuel was working out were not sought. The police officer who responded to the call noticed that Samuel was acting unusually, even though he was screaming and crying loudly. The expert suspected that he was faking his panic and anxiety. Importantly, before calling the police, Samuel contacted his parents and his uncle, a lawyer. His uncle arrived at the apartment before the police arrived to give a statement. Samuel went to the police station with his uncle. Furthermore, the next day, Samuel returned to the sealed apartment with his uncle to retrieve some personal belongings. Samuel took 2 laptops, a phone, and a tablet from Ellen. A few days later, the police decided to examine the devices and discovered that their search history included topics related to suicide. When the police arrived at the scene, they conducted only a preliminary examination and concluded that Ellen had committed suicide. Despite new information that later emerged, the police refused to change their verdict. The sequence of the injuries remains unclear, but it has been confirmed that the final wound was to the heart. The medical examiner found this odd and decided to investigate further. They sent a sample of Ellen's spine to a specialist who could assess the condition of the spinal cord. If the spinal cord was damaged, it would indicate that Ellen was paralyzed and could not have stabbed herself in the heart. Soon after, the police suddenly changed their minds and stopped the investigation, stating that, according to the report, there was no spinal cord injury. However, this conclusion was not added to the case file. It was also not noted that although there were many serious injuries on Ellen's body, there was very little blood, suggesting that someone might have wiped it away. No one actively looked for any signs of blood that had been wiped away. Additionally, the apartment's trash bins had not been checked, meaning any potential evidence inside was lost forever. Samuel's family, who were the first to arrive on the scene, notified Ellen's parents of their daughter's death. Ellen's family, who lived several hundred miles away, quickly arrived on the scene. Ellen's parents received no clear explanation of what happened that night involving Ellen. They were given only vague conclusions and were told that no criminal investigation would be initiated. Ellen's parents then chose to conduct an investigation, bringing in independent experts. Shortly thereafter, a private investigator contacted them and offered to assist them for free, as he wanted to shed light on this puzzling case. The detective examined the evidence and concluded that Ellen's body had been moved after her death. He also discovered smears on the floor that looked like drag marks. Additionally, when reviewing the case, the security guard recalled that Samuel, who had asked for help, was wearing a tracksuit and said he had just come from the gym, when in fact he was wearing boots. Despite this new evidence and witness testimony, Ellen's parents were once again denied a criminal case and no further investigation was conducted. Ellen's parents were not allowed access to important case files. 4 years later, a young police officer joined the unit as an assistant prosecutor. After learning about this unusual unsolved case while in college, he decided to look into the archives to uncover the truth. His attention was drawn to the wound at the back of the head, which might have been the first sign that Ellen had been attacked from behind when she was not expecting it. He was concerned to note that there was no spinal cord injury, but there was no official document to prove it. He assumed it was lost somewhere in the archives. He later formally requested a copy of the document from the Forensic Center, and it turned out that no one had ever come to such a conclusion and the body had not been examined for spinal cord injury. A fragment of the spine was surprisingly preserved and could be re-examined. An independent specialist assessed it and found that the spinal cord had sustained damage in multiple areas, indicating that Ellen could not have caused any additional injuries to herself. The findings were submitted to the police, but after reviewing them again, they decided not to pursue criminal charges. In 2018, the medical examiner concluded that Ellen had inflicted all 20 of her injuries on herself. The investigation reached a dead end. In their grief, the parents hired a new lawyer and together they gathered all the previously undocumented documents, evidence, facts, and witness statements. In 2019, they filed a new lawsuit against the medical examiner and the police. The following spring, the case was accepted and settled, but the trial never took place due to the global pandemic. Due to negligence by the police and medical examiners, important evidence was lost forever. Ellen's parents created a social media page to track the progress of the investigation, sharing official documents, new information, and updates. Ellen's family, friends, and colleagues are convinced that she could not have killed herself, especially not in such a brutal way. In the summer of 2022, the case was dismissed again, and Ellen's parents successfully appealed to the district attorney's office, where a new prosecutor took over. The investigation was restarted 11 years after the tragic events, but to this day it remains unsolved. During the first year after the tragedy, Samuel tried to keep in touch with Ellen's family. However, he did not participate in their investigation and refused to communicate with the police. He seemed to have no interest in the case, as Samuel accepted Ellen's death as a suicide. Samuel got married a year later. He and his wife moved to another state and cut ties with Ellen's family. They are now raising 2 children together. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kira Steger. Kira Steger was born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois, to parents Marcy and Jay Steger. They remembered her as a vibrant, dedicated, and kind-hearted person. At the time of her disappearance, Kira worked at 2 stores in the Mall of America, Wet Seal and Delia's. Her co-workers were not only close friends, but also like family to her. Kira had a remarkable ability to recognize people's hidden strengths and had a promising future ahead of her. However, her life took a tragic turn when she mysteriously vanished on February 21, 2013. On the day she disappeared, Kira had a shift at work and was looking forward to a dinner date with her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, at a nice restaurant after her shift ended. Kira and Jeffrey had met 3 years prior and quickly fell in love, eventually getting married. To those around them, they appeared to be a happy and stable couple, with only occasional disagreements that they kept private. Neither their relatives, friends, nor co-workers were aware of any significant issues in their relationship. On Saturday, February 23rd, Kira's co-workers became concerned when she failed to show up to work. She was known for being punctual, strict, and adhering to her schedule. When they couldn't reach Kira, they called her husband Jeffrey. According to Jeffrey, Kira had left their house the previous morning and hadn't returned. While this wasn't entirely unusual, as Kira would occasionally spend the night at a friend's or relative's house without warning, the severe snowstorm that day was a cause for concern. Jeffrey speculated that Kira's car might have gotten stuck, and her phone battery could have died, leaving her unable to communicate. Jeffrey filed a missing persons report for his wife Kira after not hearing from her, and he also contacted her family to inform them of her disappearance. Her family was shocked and deeply disturbed by the news. Upon receiving the report, detectives launched an investigation into Kira's disappearance. As is standard procedure, they began by questioning Jeffrey and searching the surrounding area. Detectives visited Jeffrey at his home to ask him about Kira's disappearance. He told them that on the previous Thursday, he and Kira had spent time together, having dinner, talking, bowling, and then leaving the mall. According to Jeffrey, they went straight home after that, where Kira planned to watch a movie. Jeffrey also reported that Kira left their house the following Friday morning around 8:30 a.m. to attend a mandatory work event. He stated that Kira was acting normally and didn't appear to be behaving strangely before she left. Jeffrey wasn't concerned about Kira's frequent disappearances, despite not knowing her whereabouts. They had minor relationship issues, but Jeffrey didn't consider them serious. When questioned, he dismissed the possibility of Kira having a lover, citing a previous conversation where she denied it. Jeffrey claimed to trust and love his wife. Investigators relayed information to patrol units and visited the Mall of America to verify Jeffrey's testimony. The Mall of America in Bloomington is one of the largest shopping malls in the world. As such, the mall is equipped with multiple security cameras. Detectives investigated Kira's disappearance by reviewing the footage from the time she left work on February 21st. The footage showed nothing unusual. Jeffrey's account was confirmed, as the footage showed that he met Kira after work, and they spent time together at the mall before leaving. There were no signs of arguments or trouble. Kira's family was struggling with her disappearance, and their anxiety grew as the days passed. They decided to take action and travel to Bloomington to help with the investigation. They created flyers with her picture and posted them around town, hoping to attract attention to the search. The investigators questioned neighbors and obtained footage from a security camera that partially captured Kira and Jeffrey's home. Kira's cell phone records also became available, revealing a significant new lead. A man named Ryan Wendt, a manager at a store where Kira worked, with whom she had a long-term and intense relationship. Police investigated Ryan after learning he'd traveled out of state during Kira's disappearance, raising suspicions due to his past romantic relationship with her and their concurrent out-of-state moves. Detectives sought to determine whether his actions were coincidental or incriminating. The detectives managed to locate Ryan in Colorado and asked him to answer questions. During the questioning, Ryan stated that he had last been in contact with Kira via text messages while driving through South Dakota. He said these messages were sent shortly before Kira disappeared. The police analyzed the timing of these messages and discovered that Kira had been texting with Ryan while she was having dinner with Jeffrey. It was clear that Kira was distancing herself from Jeffrey. The investigators examined Ryan's phone and credit card records to verify his location. Their analysis indicated that Ryan was indeed out of state that evening and had no connection to Kira's disappearance. Based on this information, Ryan was eliminated as a suspect. Further analysis of the messages revealed that Kira had been texting with Ryan even after she returned home with Jeffrey. However, her phone activity ceased at 11:44 p.m., and she has not been active since. A team of investigators reviewed video footage from a surveillance camera at Kira's neighbor's house. The camera's rapid movement made it difficult to observe, but it did capture Jeffrey and Kira's house for a few seconds. According to Jeffrey, they returned home after dinner and bowling, watched a movie, and went to bed. However, the footage showed Kira's car backing into the yard at 2 a.m. and driving away, despite the poor video quality and constant motion. Jeffrey claimed he drove to the gas station to fill up Kira's car, as she had asked him to do before her commute the next day. His alibi checked out, as he was indeed seen at the gas station around 3:30 a.m. However, after leaving the gas station, he didn't return home. Instead, he headed towards the highway, but his exact destination is unknown. Although a neighbor's camera didn't capture him returning home, it's possible he may have arrived when the camera was facing a different direction. Kira's Chevrolet was seen leaving her residence at 9:21 a.m., but the driver's identity couldn't be determined. A missing person report was filed on February 23rd. On February 25th, police received a call about a suspicious vehicle near Kira's workplace. The vehicle had been parked in a multi-story parking lot for several days and was found with suspicious red smudges on the trunk lid. Kira's white Chevy was found with signs of a tragic event, including a few small bloodstains. Her purse, containing divorce court forms, was recovered from the vehicle. A rolled-up trunk mat with dark stains, later confirmed to be her blood, was discovered behind the car. The car left the house at 9:21 a.m. and was captured on camera at the mall 20 minutes later. Unfortunately, there was no camera in the parking lot where the car was eventually found, but there was a camera that captured footage of the path leading to the car. After reviewing the footage, detectives noticed a man wearing a hoodie, which was not unusual given the cold weather, walking after the car had entered the parking lot. The man crossed the street and approached a taxi stand, where he had a brief conversation with a driver before getting into the car and driving off. The police were able to identify the taxi company and determine which car the man had ridden in by tracking the time of the interaction. Since the cabs were equipped with GPS tracking devices, the police were able to determine that the man ended his trip a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house and paid for the ride in cash before getting out of the car. As the cab drove away from the neighborhood, it was caught on camera by the same surveillance camera that had partially captured Kira and Jeffrey's residence. 2 minutes later, a man wearing a hoodie with a distinctive white logo entered the camera's frame. Although the poor video quality made it hard to discern his face, investigators suspected that the man was likely Jeffrey, given that Kira was missing and the man with the hooded sweatshirt was seen entering Kira and Jeffrey's house. Law enforcement officers executed a search warrant and visited the house, finding numerous dark red stains in the bedroom, including nearly 100 on the mattress. After rearranging and cleaning the room, investigators used luminol to reveal additional stains on the carpet that were not visible to the naked eye. The stains, which originated in the bedroom, were confirmed to be Kira's blood, leading investigators to believe she was likely no longer alive. A search of Jeffrey's car found no blood or signs of a struggle, but a gas station receipt indicated a purchase was made with his card 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned. Detectives went to the gas station to review the security footage. The footage showed Jeffrey filling up his car and then going inside to withdraw cash from an ATM. This gave them a clear view of Jeffrey's face and revealed a logo on his jacket that matched the one seen on the man in the earlier footage. Based on this new evidence and the evidence found at the house, 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino was arrested. He was taken to the police station for questioning and became the main suspect. Jeffrey contacted his attorney during the interrogation and was advised to remain silent. The police had enough evidence to charge him, but needed to find Kira's body to prove his guilt. After months of searching by the police, Kira's family and volunteers, a suspicious bag was found by the side of the road at Keller Lake, near Trevino's house, as the snow began to melt in late March. A bag containing a bloodied pillow, shirt, and bra was discovered, and forensic analysis revealed that the items had Kira's DNA on them. Although the search of the lake was hindered by the presence of ice, divers searched the water body, but unfortunately, no remains were found. The area around the lake was also thoroughly searched using 4 trained search dogs, but these efforts were unsuccessful. 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, a disturbing call on May 8, 2013, led police to a body in the Mississippi River. Body was identified through dental records as Kira Steger, with severe blunt force trauma and a fractured index finger, making her exact cause of death impossible to determine due to decomposition. To uncover the truth, investigators worked to rebuild the sequence of events surrounding Kira's death. Their theory was as follows. When Kira and Jeffrey arrived home, he discovered that she was texting someone else, which made him suspicious. Kira refused to let him see the messages, leading Jeffrey to violently take her phone and break her finger in the process. Upon reading the romantic messages, Jeffrey's anger intensified, ultimately driving him to kill Kira. After committing the crime, he attempted to erase any evidence of his wrongdoing. Jeffrey used Kira's car to transport her body to a house, where he put it in the trunk. He then stopped at a gas station before driving to a river, where he disposed of the body. On his way back home, he threw away a bag containing Kira's pillow and clothes. The next day, he went to a gas station to withdraw cash from an ATM, knowing he would need it to pay for a taxi after abandoning Kira's car in a mall parking lot. After getting rid of the car, Jeffrey returned home and spent the rest of the day cleaning the house. Jeffrey's goal was to make it seem like Kira had driven away from her car on her own that morning and was unharmed. However, surveillance footage foiled his plan. In October 2013, a jury found Jeffrey Trevino guilty, agreeing that his actions were not planned in advance, but rather the result of a heated argument that escalated into violence after he discovered Kira's infidelity. Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison in November 2013. He will be eligible for parole in 2031. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Smith family. George, from a happy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, grew up with his father's liquor store as a central part of his life. After studying business at Babson College, George worked in Boston as a data mining analyst, but his true passion remained the family business. So, he eventually returned home to learn the ins and outs of the store from his father. In 2002, George met Jennifer, also from Connecticut, at a friend's reunion. Jennifer had just started her teaching career as an elementary school teacher. The couple fell deeply in love, and George's parents were overjoyed with his choice. 3 years later, in 2005, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. They got married at Castle Hill Inn in Newport, Rhode Island, with the ocean as a stunning backdrop. The honeymoon cruise that followed was meant to be a relaxing and joyful experience. However, it turned out to be a mysterious and frightening journey that filled them with uncertainty. George and Jennifer met Josh, a 20-year-old from California, and another couple on a cruise ship. Josh quickly became friends with George, and on July 1st, the group decided to spend the day together on land when the ship reached the Italian coast. They had an amazing time exploring the island, trying local food, and creating unforgettable memories. That evening, George and Jennifer met up with their friends again on the ship and decided to have a fun night, enjoying appetizers and drinks before heading to the casino. George and Josh played craps while Jennifer played poker. Although they lost a significant amount of money, they didn't regret it, joking that it was part of their honeymoon. The last time George was seen on video was leaving the casino around 2:30 a.m. Tragedy struck on the morning of July 5, 2005, on the Greek island of Mykonos. George, 26, vanished. The ship's captain searched the cabin where strange footprints were found, as well as the deck, but George was nowhere to be found. The available evidence suggested that something serious had happened, possibly involving violence. The news spread quickly, causing alarm among the passengers. Deck 7 was sealed off, and no one was allowed in or out of their cabins. After discovering blood, it was assumed that George and Jennifer had mysteriously disappeared. The senior officer took charge of the investigation, searching their stateroom for clues. One possibility was that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for the young couple continued. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found where she was having a pre-booked massage. She seemed surprised and concerned, claiming to be unaware of her husband's whereabouts and that she hadn't seen him since the previous night. She revealed that when she woke up that morning, her husband wasn't there. But she didn't search for him, assuming he was with friends or in another cabin. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation, and the ship's captain reassured the anxious passengers, expressing hope that the situation would be resolved soon. The police investigation into George Smith's disappearance began with his wife Jennifer, who was agitated and seemingly unaware of her husband's whereabouts. She told them that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had come to her door, saying George might have fallen overboard. Traces of blood were found on the boat's awning, suggesting something terrible had happened. The investigators focused on cabin, which was in disarray, with signs of a possible struggle. They found small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators discovered 2 small bloodstains on the bedding, which were identified as George's blood. All evidence pointed to George being harmed inside the cabin before he vanished mysteriously. A chair on the balcony had been moved, suggesting someone had sat there, which raised suspicions that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the high railing and blood on the awning and inside the cabin also hinted at a possible murder. The investigators started to reconstruct the events of that night, trying to figure out who George was with and what led to the tragedy. They questioned the group of young men who had spent time with the newlyweds the previous night. The men revealed that George and Jennifer had consumed too much alcohol, and they had helped him back to his cabin, where they put him to bed and left him alone. However, there were discrepancies in Josh Askin's testimony. He claimed to have seen Jennifer leave with a casino employee named Lloyd, but video footage showed Jennifer stumbling away at 3:30 a.m., leaving George with her new friends. Lloyd's key card data indicated he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., contradicting Josh's account. The investigation continued, with each new detail adding more mystery to the story. It was discovered that Greg Rosenberg, a 19-year-old with Russian roots, had been part of the group that night. He had met Jennifer in the casino, and they had gambled together until late. The group then headed to the disco, where they continued to drink and dance. As the night wore on, the group members began to disperse to their cabins, but not before they were visibly drunk and rowdy. The events of the night became increasingly unclear, with different witnesses providing conflicting accounts. After the cruise ship staff refused to serve two intoxicated visitors, Josh and his friends remembered they had brought a bottle of absinthe from the island of Mykonos. However, crew and passengers were not allowed to consume their own alcohol on board. Josh went to retrieve a special bottle of absinthe from his cabin, which had an unusually high alcohol concentration of over 70%. George hid the bottle in his shorts to avoid detection. Around 3 a.m., when the ship was quiet, a janitor caught the group, including Josh, George, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, drinking the absinthe. This incident became a key part of the investigation. Jennifer, who had appeared relatively sober, began to stagger and eventually leaned on the casino manager, Lloyd. Her behavior was misinterpreted by some witnesses, who thought she was either trying to keep her balance or flirting. Later, Jennifer got into a conflict with her husband George, which ended with her hitting him. It was unclear whether this was done in a playful or angry manner. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., stumbling and visibly intoxicated. The janitor, who had previously noticed the group drinking absinthe, helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right, although her stateroom was on the left. Later, Jennifer was found sleeping in the hallway, far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock showed 4:52 a.m., but George was not present. The curtains on the balcony doors were tightly closed, despite the breeze. This raised questions about George's whereabouts. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife, who were staying in a neighboring cabin, reported hearing a noise on their floor around 4 a.m. They heard loud noises from the newlyweds' stateroom, followed by brief silence, loud talking, and an argument on the balcony. Chit Hyman called guest services to report the noise and pounded on the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. He then saw 3 unknown men outside the cabin, but did not see George or Jennifer. Several passengers reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the ship's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the witnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. The investigation raised questions about whether one of the men who entered the cabin might have stayed behind to steal from the newlyweds. The key card records confirm that George and his friends entered his stateroom at 4:05 a.m., according to their testimony, but there is no record of them re-entering the cabin afterwards. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. One theory is that George was the victim of a robbery. George and his wife Jennifer had been drinking heavily that night, and by 3:30 a.m., they were no longer able to return to their cabin on their own, suggesting they may have been drugged. Witnesses claimed that George and Jennifer had large sums of money, possibly received as wedding gifts or casino winnings, and that they wore expensive jewelry, including a Breitling watch and an engagement ring. It's possible that their quarters were turned over, and the traces of blood on the sheet could have come from an attempt to remove George's watch. Another theory is that George's death was related to the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. The captain suggested that George might have had an accidental fall while drunk, and experts noted that absinthe could cause hallucinations in high concentrations. However, the absinthe George and Jennifer purchased was bought officially in Europe, and experts believe it was unlikely to cause hallucinations. The FBI investigation into George's disappearance involved interviewing several key individuals, including Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha, who both passed polygraph tests. Josh Askin failed his polygraph test, which may indicate that he was hiding something, but it could also be due to the interrogation tactics used. A videotape showing 3 men, including Russians, joking about George's disappearance was found, with one of them saying, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," which could be a hint about what happened to George. In 2009, 4 men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin, were interviewed by the FBI as witnesses. Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin refused to give direct answers, citing the Fifth Amendment, and their testimony remained ambiguous. The George Smith investigation was influenced by Greg Rosenberg's testimony, who claimed that he and others ordered food to their cabin that night, which would have provided an alibi for the Russian men. However, there are contradictions to this claim, as ship records do not support the order, and the cabin's delivery service was blocked the day before. Furthermore, the staff was instructed not to provide service to them that night. Greg Rosenberg's account of the relationship between George and Jennifer was also unclear, as he claimed it was difficult to determine due to heavy alcohol consumption. He emphasized that everyone in the group was highly intoxicated, making it impossible to draw conclusions about their relationship. However, there are contradictions in Greg's testimony, as Josh Askin stated that Greg left the cabin after ordering food, which Greg denied. These contradictions added complexity to the investigation, requiring further verification and fact-finding. Greg claimed that he had no information about Jennifer or Lloyd Botha's involvement in George's disappearance, but believed that the event was not accidental. He hinted that something significant happened that night that would eventually be revealed. Sadly, Greg Rosenberg was murdered in 2019, and his death remains unsolved, with police investigating a possible link between his murder and George's death. The Smith family persisted in demanding the truth and justice, but their efforts yielded little results. They offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to those responsible and called for a boycott of the ship owner's company, which they believed was covering up the incident. The family's relationship with Jennifer became strained as her behavior seemed suspicious, and her reluctance to share information raised concerns. She claimed to be following FBI instructions, but her decision to accept a $1 million settlement from the cruise company led the Smith family to lose faith in her and suspect that she was hiding something. The Smith family was disappointed with the Turkish authorities' investigation and felt that Jennifer was too quick to accept the offer. They believed that she was not showing the proper interest in finding out what happened to George. Jennifer claimed to remember little from that night, after 2:30 a.m., and was not aware that the liner staff had found her in the corridor and returned her to her cabin. The Turkish investigation did not satisfy the Smith family, leading them to seek the help of independent forensic scientist Henry Lee, who conducted further studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. The investigation into George Smith's disappearance aimed to determine whether his death was a murder or an accident. Henry Lee, an expert, suggested that the balcony's height made it uncertain whether George died from a fall, and alternative scenarios, such as being pushed by someone or being in a state of insanity, could not be ruled out. Lee planned to simulate a fall from the balcony using a dummy to gather more evidence, but the cruise liner's owner refused to allow it. This decision raised suspicions among George's relatives, who believed it was an attempt to conceal the truth. The FBI conducted their own investigation, focusing on the 4 men who spent the night with George, including Josh Askin and 3 Russians. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the confusion. Despite the lengthy investigation and multiple theories, the truth behind George's disappearance remains unknown. His family continues to seek answers, suspecting foul play and initially pointing fingers at Jennifer, his new wife. However, they eventually cleared her of suspicion and received a payout from the cruise company. The family used the payout to secure the release of the investigation results, including witness statements and other evidence. Jennifer, now exonerated, dedicated herself to charity work in George's memory. Years later, Jennifer remarried, but the case remains unsolved. The FBI closed the investigation due to lack of evidence, ruling George's death an accident. The mystery surrounding his disappearance continues to haunt his family, who are still searching for the truth and a sense of closure. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela to Andrina Bermudos Millian from Matarina, Monagas, and Leonardo Salazar from Tucupito, Delta Amacuro. In 2016, Paula's parents decided to move to Ecuador with their one-year-old daughter, seeking a better life. They settled in Quito, the capital city, but their relationship began to deteriorate due to various reasons. After a month, Andrina broke up with Leonardo and moved to Cuenca, Ecuador's third-largest city, with Paula. They stayed with her best friend's mother while looking for a new place to live and work. Meanwhile, Leonardo returned to his hometown of Tucupito, Venezuela, following the breakup. Later, he immigrated again, this time to Trinidad and Tobago. Leonardo had been living with a disability for a long time, the result of a motorcycle accident in his youth that left his left arm completely paralyzed. This made it difficult for him to find a good job, even in Ecuador's capital city. After Andrina moved to Cuenca, she rarely contacted Leonardo, except to tell him that she had found a job on a farm in Tapacundo. A few months later, she started a new romantic relationship with Washington Andreas Aymaro, the wealthy owner of the farm where she worked. Andrina and Andreas had a child together in 2019. With their new baby, the family seemed happier and more united than ever. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on March 27, 2020. On that day, Andreas took Paula to the flower plantations by car, but during the trip, Paula suddenly became very sick, feeling dizzy and vomiting. Andreas was forced to stop at a public restroom to tend to her. Andreas and the 4-year-old girl Paula entered a room where Paula vomited again. Andreas left her alone for a few minutes to get a change of clothes from the car, as her clothes were dirty. When he returned, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He pulled her out, tried to give her first aid, and rushed her to the hospital. Despite his efforts, Paula showed no signs of life when doctors examined her. The doctors pronounced Paula dead and immediately noticed inconsistencies in Andreas' story. They saw that Paula had bruises on her body and face that couldn't have occurred as Andreas described. Following medical protocol, the doctors contacted the police, who arrived shortly and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's murder. Andreas claimed Paula had drowned in the toilet bowl, but the autopsy revealed a darker truth. The tests showed that Paula had been dead for about 24 hours before arriving at the hospital, contradicting Andreas's version of events. Paula's foster father alleged that he provided her with first aid and CPR, and that these efforts took place just 20 minutes before he brought her to the hospital. However, the autopsy revealed that Paula had suffered multiple broken ribs, various microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, which ultimately led to her death. The autopsy findings were alarming, as Paula's small body showed evidence of numerous injuries, both recent and old. The evidence suggested that her death was not accidental. Paula's biological father, Leonardo Salazar, discovered the tragic news 33 days after her death, when his mother in Venezuela called to inform him of the loss, having learned of it herself from a friend of Andrina's. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andrina began a new relationship and cut off all communication with him. This is why he didn't hear about his daughter Paula's tragedy for 3 days. The only way he found out about her was through pictures sent by Andrina and their mutual friends. Andrina even blocked him on social media, preventing him from contacting Paula, and cut off ties with most of Leonardo's relatives. Andrina turned their mutual friends against Leonardo by telling them that he didn't want to communicate with Paula. However, it was Andrina's family who eventually informed Leonardo of Paula's death, claiming that she died from COVID-19 complications. But Leonardo was skeptical, as there were very few coronavirus deaths in Ecuador at the time. He started researching the statistics and noticed that there were no child victims of the coronavirus in Ecuador. Leonardo's relatives helped him investigate, and they soon found a newspaper article about Andrina's arrest, on suspicion of killing Paula. When Leonardo confronted Andreina about this, she coldly told him that Paula died from diseases and couldn't provide more information due to her lawyer's advice. Leonardo then created a Facebook page and an Instagram profile dedicated to Paula, seeking justice for her death. The posts caused a huge backlash on social media, and people in Andreina's circle began contacting Leonardo, sharing information about Paula's sad life. They sent him recordings, photos, and audio recordings that revealed the abuse Paula suffered at the hands of her stepfather and Andreina. According to witnesses, Paula was constantly depressed, shy, and frightened in the presence of her stepfather. She even confessed to being beaten by Andreina and her stepfather as punishment. Paula called her stepfather a monster and was terrified of him. She suffered from insomnia and nightmares, and her mother forced her to cook and take care of herself from a very young age. Andreina's mistreatment of Paula eventually led to her death, and Leonardo was determined to bring her to justice. At the preschool Paula attended, she constantly complained of leg and back pain, and often said she couldn't walk. The teachers also noticed bruises on her body. They took her to the health center for an examination, and the doctors concluded that Paula was being mistreated by her family. The teachers then reported the abuse to a special police organization, which launched an investigation. As a result, Paula was temporarily placed in the care of her uncle, Andreina's brother, on October 16, 2019, while the investigation continued. A hearing was scheduled for December 4, 2019, but the teachers who were supposed to testify failed to show up. The hearing was rescheduled for February 27, 2020, but again, the teachers didn't appear. Without their testimony, the court had to drop the charges against Paula's parents, and she was returned to her mother on March 27. Tragically, Paula died soon after. It is suspected that Andreina may have bribed the teachers or convinced them that Paula's parents were not responsible for her abuse. After Paula's death, Andreina was placed in protective custody, but she appealed this decision. At a hearing on June 12, 2020, the judge set a restraining order and released Andreina to house arrest. Meanwhile, Paula's father, Leonardo, was campaigning on social media and raising funds to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador to file a complaint against Andreina. With the help of two Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro, Leonardo was able to travel to Ecuador and file a complaint against Andreina. Leonardo's journey was extremely difficult due to closed borders and restricted travel. He had to take a raft, cross treacherous terrain, and use private transfers to reach Ecuador. On June 30th, he arrived in Quito and met with a lawyer to file his complaint. On July 6, 2020, Andreina was charged with Paula's murder, and the court ruled that she could remain under house arrest, reporting to justice twice a week. Both Andreina and her partner, Andreas, were charged with murder, which carries a maximum sentence of 13 years in prison. In November 2020, a hearing was held to set a trial date. During the hearing, Leonardo's lawyer expressed concern that Andreina might escape, given her previous suicide attempt. They requested that Andreina be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet, which the judge granted. A hearing was held on November 16th to reassess previous decisions. Although this process slowed down the trial, the judge managed to set a date for December. Despite limited media coverage, information about the trial of Andreas and Andreina spread through social media. The trial began on January 14, 2021, but a decision on Andreina's alternative imprisonment options had not been made, and Andreas was still being held at the Regional Detention Center. The trial was held in private, without media representatives present. Some participants joined via video link. The doctor who performed the autopsy on Paula revealed disturbing details. Paula had undergone extensive spinal reconstruction, had broken ribs that had healed on their own, and had signs of previous injuries. The autopsy also showed that Paula had nail stigmata, a condition where nails grow into the skin, as well as facial and bodily bruises and scratches, fluid buildup in her lungs, head scars, and intestinal lacerations. The assessment found that Paula's later injuries led to an infection, which gradually worsened into sepsis and ultimately caused her death. The autopsy report revealed that Paula had been dead for around 24 hours by the time Andreas took her to the hospital. The extent of her internal and external injuries shockingly demonstrated the extreme cruelty she suffered and the gross neglect by her guardians, who had never sought medical attention for her. Additionally, Paula was severely malnourished, underweight, and small for her age, with deficiencies in essential minerals and nutrients. In an attempt to downplay her role in Paula's abuse, her mother, Andreina, claimed that Paula had psychological problems, implying that the child's injuries were self-inflicted as a way to seek attention. The girl's mother testified that after her brother's birth, Paula felt neglected, stopped sleeping at night, and tried to control everyone by crying. Contrary to the decision of the authorities, Paula continued to live with her parents in October 2019, only spending a few nights at her uncle's house. This failed arrangement was linked to the abuse Paula suffered, which began in 2017, shortly after Leonardo left Ecuador. The mistreatment likely started when Andreina began a relationship with Andreas. More than 40 witnesses testified in court, confirming that Paula was a victim of abuse for at least 3 years of her short life. At the final court hearing, Andreina took full responsibility for abusing Paula, claiming she alone was responsible for the child's injuries. She admitted to physically punishing Paula with a belt and her fists. By doing so, Andreina attempted to exonerate her partner, stating he was innocent and had no involvement in the abuse. Andreina also revealed that she punished Paula because the child's presence was causing problems in her new relationship. She feared that if she broke up with her new husband, she would lose financial stability and be forced back onto the streets. As a result, caring for Paula was her lowest priority. After learning about Paula's background, the judges were concerned about the well-being of the couple's newborn son, but it's clear that he was not abused like Paula was. Andreas has consistently exercised his right to remain silent, making no statements about the incident since his arrest. By February 3, 2021, Paula's trial had concluded and the couple was sentenced. Both were found guilty of murdering the girl with a maximum sentence of 13 years. The original attorneys and the prosecution demanded the maximum punishment, but the chief judge considered an aggravating factor. Paula's age, just 4 years old, made her vulnerable and unable to defend herself. As a result, the judge sentenced Andreina and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. Under Ecuadorian law, the convicted couple had 3 days to appeal the verdict, which they were expected to do immediately. Although Andreina received a 17-year sentence, she remained on house arrest and didn't go to jail, as she exercised her right to appeal. Now a higher court must confirm her sentence for incarceration. She is still cooperating with the authorities, following the original guidelines. However, Andreas was arrested when he arrived at the hospital with a deceased girl. The fact that Andreina remains at large is causing widespread outrage and anger, particularly for Leonardo, who is concerned that she might use this opportunity to evade justice. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nancy Paola Reyes. Nancy Paola Reyes Gorsi was born on April 13, 1991, in Granados, Guatemala, to Jorge and Pren Gorsi, a poor family of 7. Despite their financial struggles, her parents were determined to provide their 5 children with a good education, hoping they would have better lives. Nancy excelled in school, which enabled her to enroll in the University of Villanova, where she earned a degree in business administration and document management with honors. However, her academic achievements did not immediately translate to career success. She worked part-time as a cashier and later became an administrator at a supermarket, but her professional growth stagnated. During her university years, Nancy was in an unregistered marriage with a man whose identity remains private, and they had 2 daughters together. Unfortunately, The relationship ended and the couple separated. The father of the children lost interest in their well-being and failed to provide financial support. Nancy lived with her parents and daughters, working at a supermarket with no clear future prospects. The family struggled financially, barely covering essential expenses. However, Nancy's older sister's decision to immigrate to the U.S. in 2013 changed everything. Her sister found a good job, got married, and settled down, inspiring Nancy to make a similar change. Instead of the U.S., Nancy chose to relocate to sunny Spain. The problem was that Nancy didn't have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone cover initial expenses. So she worked hard for several years, saving diligently until she finally had enough money to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, promising her parents she would stay in touch to alleviate their worries. Her plan was to find a place to live and a job upon arrival, with a few €1,000 to cover rent, food, and essentials until she could secure a steady income. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. After a brief stay in Madrid, Nancy moved to Barcelona and later settled in Cádiz, the capital of the province of Cádiz, Spain. She kept in close touch with her family, calling home almost every day to check in on them and regularly sending money to support them. Over time, her remittances enabled her parents not only to support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Although Nancy didn't have a steady job, she made a living by doing odd jobs like cleaning houses for wealthy families and caring for the elderly and sick. Despite the challenges, Nancy never complained and was optimistic about her decision to move to Europe, where she believed she had more opportunities. She was convinced that she could never have earned as much back in Guatemala, even if she worked non-stop without days off. Nancy was pleased with her new life and even planned to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a comfortable and spacious home for the whole family. Nancy initially kept her personal life private, citing her busy work schedule as the reason. However, in the spring of 2020, she confided in her parents about meeting Carlos Andres Bustamante, with whom she had begun a romantic relationship. The two had met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to live, and as they spent more time together, their relationship blossomed. They eventually moved in together, with Carlos being a year older than Nancy. At the start of their relationship, Carlos didn't have a steady income, relying on small, odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering their housing and bills, and often providing financial support for Carlos's personal expenses. Despite this, Nancy never expressed any concerns to her family, leading them to believe that she had found a loving and supportive partner. Nancy's two younger brothers had also relocated to Spain, and she remained in close contact with them, especially Dennis, the youngest, who had met Carlos and found him likable. In June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to Santander, a resort city on the Atlantic coast. When Nancy spoke with her family, she mentioned that the climate was warmer and there were more job opportunities. However, this was when problems in her relationship with Carlos started to emerge, which she tried to keep hidden. Carlos turned out to be jealous, hot-tempered, and even cruel. He had no career ambitions and was content to be supported by Nancy. Moreover, he struggled with alcohol abuse and occasionally used prohibited substances, despite repeatedly promising to quit and find a stable job. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, she was already questioning whether to continue her life with Carlos. Carlos was overjoyed by the news and promised that their life would improve, but in reality, things only worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or asking his mother for it. Worse still, he began physically abusing Nancy, which she tried to conceal from everyone. On the evening of August 12th, a disturbing scene unfolded while Nancy was video chatting with her parents. Her partner, Carlos, suddenly burst into a fit of rage, yelling at Nancy and demanding to know who she was talking to. Refusing to believe her when she told him it was her mother, he snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by glancing at the screen, he carelessly tossed the device onto a chair and walked away. The very next day, a similar incident occurred. Carlos again wrestled the phone from Nancy's hands while she was speaking with her parents and daughters. He insisted on knowing who she was talking to, hurled insults at her, and even made threats. A terrified Nancy later attempted to downplay the situation to her relatives, attributing Carlos's behavior to excessive jealousy and assuring them that everything was under control. However, her concerned parents urged her to report the incidents to the police, but Nancy insisted on handling the matter herself. On August 17th, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were ominous, she didn't explain further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard from Nancy. Nancy vanished on August 20th around 2 p.m. She sent a text to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. Her family tried contacting Carlos, but he didn't respond either. The situation was alarming because the couple had recently moved to Santander, had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country. A few days later, a suspicious message came from Carlos's phone, claiming that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. The message stated that Nancy had left to find a new apartment, ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy's brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real to file a missing person report with them. Carlos agreed, but he never showed up, didn't file the report, and ceased communicating with the family. Nancy's relatives reached out to the police to file a report about her disappearance. In the meantime, Nancy's friends provided her brothers with the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, she became emotional and confessed that she had suspected her son might do something harmful to his partner, but she didn't provide any specific details. Sandra also claimed to have no knowledge about the whereabouts of her son and his fiancée. Although Carlos wasn't answering her calls, he sent her brief messages asking her to stop inquiring and to give him some time. Despite liking Nancy, Sandra was aware of her son's capabilities and understood his true nature. Sandra went to the police station the next day for questioning about Nancy's disappearance. She told the officers what she had already shared with Nancy's brothers, Carlos's troubling behavior and a lengthy text message from Nancy. In the message, Nancy warned Sandra not to give Carlos any money because he would waste it on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. Nancy said Carlos had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior had become increasingly threatening, making her consider leaving him. She believed it was better to end their relationship before someone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered some disturbing information about Carlos. He had been convicted of bodily harm multiple times, including brutally beating his own mother when he was 17. Although he only received probation at the time, he later served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and had relationships with. The investigation into Carlos and Nancy's relationship revealed many red flags from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, drug addiction, and a criminal record, which was compounded by his uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, Nancy's friends disclosed that she was not just a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had claimed. Instead, she was providing escort services to wealthy clients in Santander, earning a substantial income. Carlos was aware of her occupation and initially accepted it, as it allowed him to avoid finding work himself. However, when Nancy became pregnant, Carlos's behavior became increasingly erratic. He grew suspicious about the child's paternity, wondering if it belonged to one of her clients. Additionally, he was consumed by jealousy, vacillating between preventing her from interacting with other men and forcing her to continue working to support them financially. Meanwhile, Carlos squandered the money he took from his mother on his own vices, leaving them struggling to make ends meet. After nearly a week of unexplained absence, Nancy and Carlos's whereabouts were unknown. Although Carlos had been in touch through messages, he never revealed his location. It wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a search warrant for the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. The discovery they made was gruesome and left no doubt that Nancy had met a tragic end. Bloodstains were found throughout the apartment, with some attempts made to clean them up, but most were still visible to the naked eye, including in the clogged bathroom and toilet drains. The police also found fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs. Forensic analysis confirmed that these belonged to Nancy, even though her body was not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally killed, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos was quickly identified as the main suspect in the case due to evidence found in the apartment, including a package from a local hardware store with his fingerprints on it. The package was for a small hatchet, but the tool itself was not discovered. Further investigation revealed that Carlos had bought the hatchet, along with rubber gloves and large trash bags, at a nearby market on August 20th. This was confirmed by security footage from the store. An elderly vendor who sold Carlos a small cart also positively identified him from a photo. The day after the gruesome discovery in the apartment, Carlos surprisingly surrendered to a Madrid police station, attempting to shift suspicion away from himself. He claimed to be reporting Nancy missing, but was promptly arrested as the prime suspect in the heinous crime. Carlos professed his innocence, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th, after which he left town in an emotional state. Unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy, he suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to gather her belongings. However, Carlos's alibi seemed dubious, especially considering the police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. Despite conducting an extensive search of nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of divers, no trace of Nancy was found. To further investigate, the police tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th, using his mobile phone signals, revealing that he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast and visiting Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to conceal his activities, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel across the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage captured Carlos's movements on the evening of August 20th. He was seen walking towards a large forest park, but returned to his apartment late at night. He then left again, this time pushing a cart filled with unusual, oddly shaped bags. Since there were few cameras within the park, Carlos vanished from view once he entered the wooded area. Later, he re-emerged with the same cart, but it was now significantly lighter. He then proceeded towards the railway tracks, which were located near a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. After visiting this area, Carlos returned once more, but this time without the extra weight, providing law enforcement with a clear lead on where to search for the body. On September 16th, police discovered bags containing badly decomposed human remains in a heavily overgrown area on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of Nancy Gorcey, who had been dismembered into 20 parts using a hatchet. Although security camera footage showed everything Carlos had transported in a cart was recovered, one crucial item was still missing: the fetus of the 4-month pregnant Nancy. The state of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen revealed a brutal mutilation with a knife and hatchet, suggesting that the killer had removed the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Despite mounting evidence, Carlos refused to admit his involvement, providing contradictory statements and trying to shift the blame onto an unknown attacker. However, traces of Nancy's blood were found on his clothes and shoes, which he had attempted to wash off but failed to completely remove. Through diligent investigation, authorities were able to reconstruct the sequence of tragic events and the entire scenario of the crime, ultimately incriminating Carlos. Forensic experts have reconstructed the events of August 20th. After an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner, Nancy, in the kitchen, where bloodstains were later found on the floor and walls. Next, he moved Nancy's body to the bathroom, went shopping at a hardware store in the market, and then used a hatchet and large kitchen knife to dismember her body into 20 pieces. He placed the pieces in bags and loaded them into a cart. That night, he took the cart to a park, searching for secluded areas to dispose of the body parts. He followed a pre-planned route, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. The fate of the fetus removed from Nancy's body remains unknown. Carlos denied his guilt, claiming to have loved Nancy from the time of the murder until his arrest in Madrid. He used the money he stole from Nancy to fund his daily bar hopping across various cities. The investigation and search for evidence and witnesses took nearly 2 years, and the trial did not begin until July 2022. In November 2022, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated, brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. However, many considered the sentence too lenient. Carlos was sentenced to 25.5 years in prison and ordered to pay €150,000 in compensation to Nancy's parents and daughters. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jackie Vandergriff. Jackie Vandergriff was born on March 4, 1992, in Carrollton, Texas. As the youngest of 2 daughters, she grew up in the colony, Frisco, Texas, surrounded by a loving family. From a young age, Jackie exhibited a natural talent for gymnastics. Before she could walk, she was already somersaulting, and her parents recognized her potential at just 3 years old. They enrolled her in gymnastics courses, and over the following years, she refined her skills and enthusiastically participated in various competitions. She eventually reached level 5 in the Texas State Gymnastics Association. Those who knew Jackie characterized her as a warm and compassionate person with a heart of gold. She genuinely cared about the well-being of others and was a loyal friend who inspired her loved ones to be the best versions of themselves. The comfort and joy she brought to those around her were palpable. Her kindness extended beyond human relationships, as she had a deep love for animals, was a lifelong vegetarian, and believed in supporting pet adoption from no-kill shelters. Jackie's passion for reading was unmatched, with the Harry Potter series ranking high on her list of favorites. Immersing herself in the magical world of Hogwarts was a regular escape for her. Besides reading, Jackie had a deep affection for music, boasting an eclectic taste that spanned from Pink to James Taylor and Rob Thomas. Her love for musicals was particularly strong, with Rent being a favorite she would attend every local performance of. After graduating from Wakeland High School in Frisco, Jackie went on to pursue a career in cosmetology at the Paul Mitchell School. She successfully completed her training and earned her license as an esthetician. Not one to rest on her laurels, Jackie opted to further her education at Texas Woman's University, where she majored in nutrition and food science. She firmly believed that good nutrition was essential and advocated for everyone's access to proper nourishment. Her ultimate vision was to educate others about the significance of healthy eating, empowering them to make informed choices. Jackie Vandergriff seemed destined for greatness, a college junior on track to achieve her dreams and make a positive impact on the world. However, a chance encounter with an evil person in the summer of 2016 would devastate her life forever. On Wednesday, September 14, 2016, shortly after dawn, a Grapevine Police Department officer in Grapevine, Texas, received a distressing call. The caller reported finding a body near Grapevine Lake. When the officer arrived at the scene, they found a scorched area with a plastic blue kiddie pool containing a badly burned body. The body was charred beyond recognition, making it impossible to determine its identity, age, or gender. the badly burned remains of a body were taken to the medical examiner's office, where fingerprint identification later confirmed that they belonged to 24-year-old Jackie Vandergriff. As detectives investigated Jackie's final hours, they discovered that she was last seen in Denton, near the college, where she had visited 2 bars, Fry Street Public House and Shots and Crafts. The autopsy conducted by the medical examiner revealed the shocking extent of Jackie's injuries. She had been killed, dismembered, decapitated, and set on fire. Most disturbingly, her killer had removed her heart. As news of Jackie's brutal murder spread throughout Denton, detectives began receiving tips from people claiming to have seen a suspicious man near the crime scene, where a fire had been set. The detectives eventually obtained CCTV footage from the 2 bars Jackie had visited around the time of her death. At 7 p.m., a man entered the Fry Street Public House, where he sat at the bar and had a drink. An hour later, Jackie arrived and struck up a conversation with the bartender and the man. Security footage captured their interaction, providing valuable clues about their possible connection. After spending about 45 minutes at the Fry Street Public House, Jackie posted a tweet at around 8:45 p.m. saying she was glad she decided to get off Tinder and walk to a bar. Shortly after, Jackie and the man left the bar together and headed to Shots and Crafts, where they joined a group of women around 9:45 p.m. The pair left Shots and Crafts together. The detectives used CCTV footage to track Jackie and the man she was with, following their journey to the convenience store where the man had parked his car. Jackie was seen getting into the car, and at that point, everything seemed fine. However, this was the last time Jackie was seen alive before her murder. The detectives interviewed the bartender at the Fry Street Public House, where Jackie had gone to apply for a job. The bartender remembered Jackie having a friendly conversation with him and a male customer, but he had no information about what happened to Jackie and the man after they left. The detectives also reviewed security footage from Shots and Crafts, where Jackie was seen with the man and a group of women. One of the women remembered receiving a business card from the man, who was a personal trainer. She had exchanged contact information with him because she was interested in fitness. Although this detail seemed insignificant at first, it would later prove to be a crucial discovery in the investigation. To their amazement, the woman still had the card in her hand and was more than willing to share the information with the investigators. On the card, they found the name Charles Bryant. By that time, the detectives had already obtained footage from Walmart, taken at 4 a.m., which clearly showed Charles buying a shovel. The detectives then conducted a thorough investigation to uncover the true identity of Charles Bryant, who was the last person seen with Jackie before her murder. Their discoveries proved to be deeply unsettling. Charles Bryant, a 29-year-old man, lived about 20 miles away from Denton, but for some reason, the city held a strong attraction for him. What was drawing him to Denton was a desperate attempt to rekindle his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, who was a resident of Grapevine and a student at the University of North Texas. In May 2016, Caitlin graduated from high school and met Charles Bryant at the restaurant where she worked in Grapevine, Texas. Charles, a personal trainer and bartender in his late 20s, stood out from the boys Caitlin knew from school. His tattoos showcased his muscular build, and Caitlin found his unique skills and mysterious nature intriguing. That summer, Caitlin and Charles spent most days together at Grapevine Lake, and their attraction grew stronger daily. While Caitlin was captivated by Charles, her mother grew concerned about their significant age gap and worried about her daughter's well-being. Caitlin's mother asked to see a picture of Charles, and initially, she was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. However, when she looked into his piercing eyes, she felt an instant sense of unease. It was as if she was staring directly at evil. As her concern for her daughter's well-being grew, she voiced her worries to Caitlin, urging her to reconsider the relationship. But Caitlin dismissed her mother's warnings, insisting that Charles was nice to her unaware of the sinister nature lurking beneath his charming facade. At first, Caitlin was happy with her new boyfriend, but as time passed, doubts began to creep in. She started questioning whether her mother had been right. Charles seemed overly self-absorbed and manipulative, and Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that he had an inflated sense of self-importance. He would constantly remind her that she could never find anyone better than him, making her feel bad about herself. By mid-August 2016, Caitlin was preparing to leave for college in Denton, and she had decided to end her relationship with Charles due to the numerous red flags she had noticed. However, Charles showed up at her home the next day, pleading with her to give him another chance and promising to change. Caitlin was persuaded, and they got back together. Only a week later, Caitlin moved to Denton to start her freshman year at college. After settling in, she finally broke up with Charles for good. Charles, however, refused to accept the breakup. On August 24th, the police found Charles on the University of North Texas campus during a traffic stop. They initially suspected him of driving under the influence, but his blood alcohol level was within the legal limit. Instead, he was arrested on several outstanding warrants and subsequently released. Charles returned to the University of North Texas several hours later and knocked on Caitlin's dorm room door, which he had surprisingly tracked down. When Caitlin answered, she immediately called 911, and by the time the officer arrived, Charles had already disappeared. The officer questioned Caitlin, who explained that she had ended their relationship due to Charles' abusive behavior and the way he spoke to her. As a result, the officer issued Charles a temporary no trespass order, prohibiting him from entering the UNT campus. Despite this, Charles was undeterred and determined to find ways to reach Caitlin, despite the restrictions. On August 31st, Charles coincidentally encountered Caitlin on her first day at a new job. Recognizing him, Caitlin asked Charles to leave. She then scheduled a meeting with her manager to discuss the situation and request that Charles be barred from entering the business premises. However, the manager regretfully informed Caitlin that he lacked the authority to grant her request. This incident ultimately forced Caitlin to quit her job. Despite her best efforts to avoid him, Charles was more determined than ever to confront Caitlin. He was hell-bent on exacting revenge and causing her even more harm. The vicious cycle of fear and intimidation continued, driven by Charles's all-consuming obsession, putting Caitlin's life in constant danger. Meanwhile, Caitlin's decision to stay on campus at the University of North Texas worried her mother sick. Her mother begged her to return home, where they could keep her safe, but Caitlin was adamant that she was safe in her dorm room. She felt secure within the university's walls. On September 6th, a terrifying incident shook Caitlin to her core when Charles suddenly showed up at her dorm on campus. As he pounded on her door, Caitlin's worst fears took over, and she hid in her roommate's closet. From her hiding place, she could hear Charles coaxing her to come out, claiming he had something for her. Her darkest fears began to materialize, and her mind raced with frightening scenarios of what Charles might have planned for her. Caitlin was terrified for her life, so she made a quick decision and called 111 from inside the closet, speaking in a whisper because she was afraid Charles could hear her. The dispatcher asked her to speak up several times, but Caitlin was too scared to talk clearly. No matter how hard the dispatcher tried, Caitlin's voice was barely loud enough to be heard because she was so frightened. The police arrived soon, but Charles had already run away. However, he left a creepy reminder that he had been there, flowers, and a 2-page handwritten letter addressed to Caitlin. The letter had disturbing messages that made the young woman even more afraid. Just a few minutes after the incident, the police caught Charles outside the campus, dressed in exercise clothes, as if he had been jogging. As a student, he was arrested for trespassing and released on bail a few hours later. Despite Caitlin's efforts to cut off all contact with Charles by blocking him on her phone, email, and social media, he kept finding new ways to reach her. Charles created multiple accounts to make sure he could still communicate with her. Recognizing that Charles's behavior had become increasingly threatening, the police intervened to help Caitlin obtain a protective court order. The very next day, she formally filed a petition for the order, which granted her legal protection against further harassment. However, despite his first arrest, Charles continued to attempt to contact Caitlin. These unwanted communications led to his second arrest for stalking, as he repeatedly violated the terms of the protective order. It was his third arrest within 2 weeks of his second arrest. Charles posted a $5,000 bond and was released from custody while out on bail. Charles Bryant went to Fry Street, a location where Caitlin frequently spent time. Although there was only circumstantial evidence, detectives were certain that Charles had met Jackie Vandergriff there, possibly linking him to Jackie's murder. However, no physical evidence existed. When the detectives assisting Caitlin with her stalking case at UNT learned that Charles was the prime suspect in a murder, they grew concerned for Caitlin's safety. Caitlin claimed she was okay, but in the days following Jackie's murder, Charles sent her numerous photos, texts, and emails. On September 18th, the police took Charles into custody for violating Caitlin's protective order. During his incarceration, detectives hoped to uncover more evidence linking Charles to Jackie's murder. While being interrogated, Charles was shown a picture of Jackie and claimed to have seen her at the bar, but denied knowing anything about her. Concurrently, a search warrant was executed at Charles's residence. The search yielded a large military-style knife and a Texas Woman's University purse, which was identified as Jackie's school purse. Additionally, the search team found a kiddie pool that had gone missing from Charles's backyard, matching the one where Jackie's body was discovered. The detectives sought the expertise of a seasoned professional who had worked with prolific killers, including the Texas Rangers. This expert was knowledgeable about the mentalities of individuals like Charles, aware that they often have a strong urge to discuss their crimes. When the interview started, Charles claimed to have no memory of Jackie. However, the expert suspected he was hiding something. The expert thought Charles knew more about Jackie's fate than he was letting on. To build trust, the expert created a relaxed atmosphere, making the conversation feel like a casual chat between friends at a bar. The expert suggested possible scenarios, trying to see if Charles would react or take the bait. They portrayed Jackie as the one who had led Charles on, causing frustration. Throughout the conversation, the expert used different tactics to gauge Charles's reactions. However, this approach was risky. If the expert pushed too hard or seemed insincere, they might lose Charles's trust and harm the investigation. So, the expert had to find a balance, staying friendly while trying to get Charles to reveal the truth. During an interview, an expert closely watched Charles's responses and body language to gain insight into his character. The expert pretended to help Charles recall the events surrounding Jackie's admission, but in reality was conducting a brief memory test. To the expert's surprise, Charles' story changed slightly during the test. At first, Charles claimed he knew nothing about Jackie's admission, but later revealed that he had spoken to her at the Fry Street public house when she applied for a job. As the conversation continued, the expert decided to take a different approach. They ordered pizza, hoping the food would help Charles relax, and the detectives could uncover the motive behind Jackie's murder. The detectives suspected that Charles' uncontrollable rage towards his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, was the catalyst behind Jackie's death. The interrogation lasted around 3 hours, during which Charles admitted to unintentionally killing Jackie during what he called kinky sex. He claimed the incident occurred in his car, and Jackie had asked him to choke her with an oversized zip tie he had. However, Charles maintained that the death was an accident. When Charles Bryant was accused of murdering Jackie Vandergriff, his ex-girlfriend Caitlin went on social media to look at Jackie's Facebook page, only to discover they were already friends. It suddenly came to Caitlin's mind that she had received a friend request from Jackie's Facebook page on the very day Jackie's body was found. Before Caitlin was even aware of the case, she was convinced that her ex-boyfriend, Charlie, who was the suspect in Jackie's murder, must have used Jackie's phone to send her the friend request. Additionally, the police also believed that a tweet sent from Jackie's account after her death, which read, "Never knew I could feel like this," was actually sent by Charles after he murdered her. Christie was shocked when she learned that Charles, a man she had met on a dating app a year earlier, was facing a murder charge. To her, Charles was a quiet and reserved person. But during their brief time together, she noticed some disturbing signs that raised her concerns. Christie said that Charles quickly became clingy and attached to her, which eventually led her to end their relationship. But Charles persisted in pursuing her, going so far as to profess his desperate love for her. This declaration caught Christie off guard, especially since they had never even shared a kiss. Christie's experience working with abused children gave her a unique insight that helped her identify certain patterns in Charles's behavior. This led her to suspect that he might have been a victim of childhood abuse, a pattern she had seen in some of the young clients she worked with. One day, Christie found the courage to ask Charles directly if he had been abused as a child. To her surprise, Charles confessed that he had indeed suffered trauma in his childhood. Although the police couldn't verify Charles's claims, Christie believed him. She maintained contact with him, albeit from a distance, because she felt sympathy for him and didn't think he was capable of murder. The autopsy of Jackie's body failed to provide clear answers about her cause of death and where she was killed before being dismembered and set on fire. The lack of insight from the autopsy results raised concerns for the prosecution, leaving key questions unanswered about the circumstances surrounding Jackie's death. Charles admitted to disposing of Jackie's body, claiming she had died accidentally during rough intercourse. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty to her murder. Caitlin, Charles's ex-girlfriend, was called to testify by the prosecution to share her experiences with his stalking behavior and violent tendencies. The goal was to establish a connection between his anger towards Caitlin and the eventual murder of Jackie, who bore a striking resemblance to Caitlin. When Caitlin took the stand, she was visibly uncomfortable and reluctantly identified Charles, commenting that he had a smirk. Overcome with emotion, she left the courtroom in tears. The judge ultimately ruled that Caitlin would not be allowed to share details of her relationship with Charles or their breakup with the jury. In April 2018, a year and a half after Jackie's tragic death, Charles Bryant went on trial for her murder. However, Jackie's best friend was too traumatized to attend the trial, finding it unbearable to face Charles in person. The thought of confronting him was a painful reminder of the devastation he had caused to their lives.